Hello and welcome to Game Brain, a podcast about our gaming group. I'm Ben Mandelker, joined today by Trey Alsop, Paul Satachet. How's everyone doing?
Doing great. Let the games begin.
Let the games begin. It's the spirit of the games.
Hey everyone, it's Paul here.
Paul, fresh from his debut at the Olympics.
That's right.
Over the weekend.
Yes, exactly. You might have seen me. I was riding along the water. I was the horseman.
He was riding a horse. For those who are wondering who that whimsical and enigmatic, masked rider of the horse and parkour master was of the opening ceremonies, it was Paul.
Thank you.
It was Paul.
You
did
finally,
great work.
I could say it. It was under wraps for a long time, but
I was like, I didn't think anyone could upstage Celine Dion, but there you were, just doing it. How are you guys doing? Hey Trey, what's going on?
Just been playing a lot of games. Ready to talk about them.
Okay. We could.
You want an actual?
We could talk about games.
Yeah, no, it's finally cooled off here in LA. It's been incredibly hot. Had the AC go out of my office, but it was back yesterday. Did some political volunteering yesterday, so feeling more positive.
Good, we love that. We have been playing a lot of games. I don't have anything to banter about beyond, I watched the Olympics.
We can talk about games on our board game podcast.
We can talk about games. Why don't we dive into some games? So we're here today. We are going to be doing a deep dive on Railways of the Lost Atlas, which will be a really interesting one to discuss because it's essentially an 18xx game, but it has been sort of aimed to be more accessible to non-18xx players. So the three of us kind of represent the spectrum a bit. Like I am the experienced 18xx player, quote unquote experienced, because like in the world of 18xx, it's like, oh, you played 100 games. Wow, you're just starting out. Like there are people who have played so many and they're like, oh, well, in operating round 3, if you don't have this train, then you might as well just give up the game. And so like, I'm not at that level. I don't think I'll ever be at that level because I just don't approach games that way. But I am the 18xx, I would say, super enthusiast. And then you have Paul, who is like, I think you enjoy them. You're like, you're
hobbyist,
the visitor or whatever. Right. But you definitely like, you're
I'm proficient.
Yeah, I mean, I played several games with you. Like, you have many under your belt.
We're in the tens of games together.
Yeah, you have many under your belt.
Yeah.
But it's not like, I don't think it's the thing that you're like...
It's not running through my veins, no.
Right. And then, Trey, you have historically bounced off of 18xx.
That's fair.
And...
and have kind of steered clear.
So, it's kind of going to be
not a hater, but I've steered clear.
You just crush a lot. You're not... No, I'm sorry. This is actually a... play on I'm not a player, I just crush a lot. I just realized it's not your... I was trying to make a pop culture reference and I kind of just fell on my face.
No, you were young and I did not get
it.
I'm sure there were listeners who understood what you just said.
No, it was a combination of me butchering the initial quote for my wordplay and then also doing it to an audience. You saw the glazed
look in my eyes. You're like, oh no.
Doing it to an audience that would not even know what, like, by audience I mean Trey. I'm saying like doing it to someone who wouldn't even get the wordplay in the first. The point is this.
We are amazing, everyone. We represent a whole spectrum of people.
I can't believe we didn't win the Golden Geek. So let's talk about some recent plays. I would like to start with Trey. Because Trey, on Tuesday, you got to play a brand new expansion to one of the most celebrated or beloved games, or at least highly ranked games of all time.
On Tuesday. Why am I blanking on
Friday?
You're talking about? Friday.
Did I say Tuesday? I meant
think
Friday.
You said Tuesday. Yes.
I'm really thrown off by my big pun.
The coffee isn't kicking yet, everyone. Like, don't worry, Ben will be here. The coffee.
I will be here, guys. When you've witnessed Paul on the river Sand, galloping on a horse.
Now I know what you're talking about. We're 0 for 2.
Brain goes to
on making the connections with Trey. We're 0 for 2. Yes, on Friday at our regularly scheduled game night at Tom's, we brought out Terraforming Mars Prelude 2. Tom had the new fan-made maps on the neoprene mats, which are very impressive. I'm assuming that Matt's going to have to own them because he loves his neoprene mats, but I don't think he did get them.
Really?
Tom said he did not think that Matt had them. We'll see. I could be wrong. But they were very impressive mats. And I've been looking, I'm excited about Prelude 2. Prelude definitely was like the expansion that made a good game in Terraforming Mars, or in my opinion, a game that actually bounced off a little bit when I first played it. But I saw a lot of people that loved Agricola saying Terraforming Mars is like the new game that they like, kind of in the same category. And then Prelude came out and made it a lot better with the introduction of these Prelude cards that kind of get you going into the game a lot quicker. And then there have been a number of other expansions to Terraforming Mars: Colonies, Turmoil, Venus Next. Venus Next is now part of the digital implementation that you can get on Steam, or whatever. And I think the thing is like the other expansions of Terraforming Mars have not been as well received. And then there's like, I think there's a bit of a spectrum where I think Colonies is still thought of pretty highly. Turmoil is, a lot of people really don't like it.
Turmoil was tough. I remember playing it with you and Tom. Maybe Paul, you were there too. You were not there. No. And we were at Tom's. I just remember it being, there were 5 of us, and it just was, it was just tough. It was tough because it was hard to wrap my brain around what exactly we had to do. Like, it was just somehow like not an intuitive expansion for me, but I'm very determined to like persevere over it. And I have personally not played a lot of these expansions. I think maybe all of them, maybe once. In fact, I know I played it once. I went to my friend Larry's place and we put out the whole game. We plugged in every single expansion and played this crazy 4 or 5 player game with every expansion, which was really fun. But I have put a lot of money into Terraforming Mars over the years. Like a lot. I own every single expansion. I own the big box. I own the little minis that, you know, like you can, there's like little 3D versions of the tiles. That way, as you build your map, it looks like a planet coming to life. I have invested so much in this game. And yet the last time it has actually hit my personal table was probably 2017, which makes me so sad because I love the game, but it just does not come.
You've only played Prelude once?
I played Prelude, actually, maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe it's like 2018, 2019. I know I have not I'm not even touched my big box ever since I got it. I played Prelude a few times. Yeah. I really enjoyed it. I'm actually of the minority of people who does not think it's an essential. I think it's super, super fun, but I've always enjoyed with Terraforming Mars how you start off with nothing. I actually love that first section where you just have the smallest little drips and drabs coming through. I think that's such a fun thing to have to push through, and then by the end you have all those gold cubes, you know, showering down on you. But I know Prelude, people love Prelude.
I think I'm in the super minority where I was not a big fan of Terraforming Mars, and then Prelude came and it made a game that I didn't like shorter.
You made it easier to get through.
It did kind of like get you down the path a lot quicker.
Yeah,
so it's like, and the thing that you were enjoying, it was definitely addressing in that, like, sometimes your initial draw in Terraforming Mars can be like, I don't see what I can combo here. Whereas I think with Prelude, when you've got 2 corporations and 4
you get more
Prelude
powers.
Cards, suddenly like it's harder direction for you to completely whiff and not have something that you're coming out of the initial
100%
draft where you've
totally
got a plan. You know?
And it's like fun. Just have more powers. It's one of those games where like the more powers you have, the more exciting it feels, because it's like the only game I can think of where you just get to let your engine run free for 3 hours. Like, there's just no game that does it like Terraforming Mars.
So here's my 2-cent take. If Prelude was the game that kind of improved, it was the expansion that improved the base game and kind of got you going quicker, and to me elevated it. So I think it's like, it's a really fantastic expansion. Prelude 2, it seems like what it's trying to do is take all the expansions,
integrate,
and then, you know, have something that's going to kind of like pull them together and make the play with all the expansions option better. I think it's still possible because the cards kind of are coded where like the things that they engage with, you could filter the cards. And if we didn't want to play with Turmoil, we can pull these cards out. That would be kind of a giant pain, but you could do it. If you did not want to play with Turmoil, you could still absolutely do it. But that seems to be the marching orders of what Prelude 2 is supposed to do. And I'm kind of eager to try that again. It did feel like a lot. Like playing with all the expansions, it just seemed like, oh, this is a lot more.
You guys plugged in all the expansions on Friday?
Yeah. Well, but that's what Prelude 2 is, I think, designed to do. That was my impression.
I mean, to me, that's actually appealing to me because, again, it's like, you know, I'm sure there are a lot of people that are like me who have just paid a lot of money for these expansions
Yeah.
and you want to use them.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sorry, sunk cost fallacy is real when it comes to board games. And like, God, nothing feels shittier when you spend a lot of money on something and then you never really use it. And then you want to use it. And then people are like, I don't like that expansion. So something that could like bring in like, to make something more palatable for others. Like if I've spent money on my Venus expansion and everyone's like, well, that's a stupid expansion. It doesn't do anything. And you're like, well, guess what? Now I've got Prelude 2 and now it's going to do something and you're going to enjoy it. That'll make me happy.
You hear that, everyone?
I did play a big floater game yesterday. So
By the way, I
did a lot of floater stuff.
I still can't believe they named a resource floater. Like that is still like the funniest thing.
So we played that last night with 4. It was kind of a getting back up to speed game where we were having to refamiliarize ourselves with all these expansions, and we got a lot of stuff wrong.
Oh yeah.
And
Who is playing?
So it was me, Dimitri, Tom, and Mike. Mike's back from his European travels.
So that's a lot of content to plug into that game.
It was, and I think we did some things wrong, and we're just kind of getting back up to speed. And so I think we were at midnight, and we still had plenty of game left, and we kind of said, okay, we've kind of gotten back up to speed. And there were a number of things that were beyond just like little asterisks in the game. It's like, oh, we were really playing colonies completely wrong the entire time.
Really? And you guys didn't even start with Avalon, right? Because there's only 4 people. So
we got right into it.
Wow. And you played one of the new maps?
Yes, we played one of the fan-made maps, the
Amazonia one?
Yes, which is bigger.
Bigger, better, juicy.
You know what? The thing is just like with all the expansions, I didn't feel like I was engaging with the map that much. So that was not necessarily positive, but it was only a single play. So I don't know. I mean, I guess my concern would be like, this feels like a lot of bloat, or at least this is like pushing a game which experienced players really can kind of pound out in 2 hours. Experienced players can pound out in 2 hours. And now this feels more like a Saturday game.
Okay. Well, you know what? I don't mind a Saturday game. My only issue with a Saturday game is that it's hard to find people reliably because guess what? People like to do things on Saturdays. So
you're one of those people.
I'm one of those people that likes to do things on Saturdays. But but if someone says, hey, do you want to play this epic game on a Saturday? I'm like, I don't care if it's beautiful weather out. I will do it because I love an all day game.
Western Civ it is.
Western Civ it is. It's almost like I'm transitioning to another gameplay session.
Good.
Did you like that? How we're gonna go? We're gonna go. Ready, Paul?
Yeah, I'm ready.
I'm nodding. I'm nodding here on the podcast.
Actually, no. I before I transition away though, like would you say overall like positive, negative, initial reaction to this new bundle of Terraforming Mars content?
I'd say mixed. I mean, we're definitely going to play it again. I especially had a negative reaction to Turmoil, especially because it has the thing that I hate, which is like it has these events that are fairly random that come out, and your ability, they say they come out early so you can see them coming, but your actually ability to mitigate them is quite limited. So that felt like this is not something I needed in the game. Where in this example, I was pursuing a strategy that was heavily space based. So like I had 6 or 7 space tags early, and then this event flips. It says for every space tag you have, lose 3 money.
And Trey, I'm just
Trey, that's your exact favorite thing to happen in a board game.
It's one of those things. Like, oh wow, the ephemeralness of life is just so like at a moment
That's when Trey says that's a feel good moment.
That's right.
Actually,
like finally,
and I think I emotionally reacted as you might expect in that moment
with
equanimity. You had some. You maybe had some choice words.
I had to, yes, I had some reactions. I went downstairs to the bathroom, changed my diaper, returned.
Did Dimitri stare at you and say, well, maybe you should have thought of that before you began the space strategy?
No, but I think I was glad Paul wasn't there to kind of, the energy vampire just soaking in my misery. But it was one of those things that's like, oh yeah, right.
That does feel shitty.
We didn't like Turmoil, did we? Like the Senate part didn't bother me so much, but it also was like, it was a lot of upkeep. And we weren't really engaging with it much. And it was kind of like, it's affecting things, but no one's really, like nobody had like a
investment in
a Galactic Senate game or whatever it was.
Right.
So it was just more.
I just remember Turmoil being non-intuitive, like, or counterintuitive. Like, certain games and expansions and rule sets, the things happen the way you kind of just expect them to happen. Like, if I want to do this thing, you do it. It's like, but I just remember with Turmoil, it was like, oh, this goes here. But then if you have the majority, then this goes here, and then you're a bit speaker, and then this piece goes here. And I just remember having to like refresh over and over again. What is the sequence of events that it happens? It just felt very like rules fiddly. Not peace fiddly, but rules fiddly in a way that was more annoying than entertaining to me. But I'm willing to, I would love to do, let's plug them all in and play Prelude. Like, I love Terraforming Mars. I've been kind of wanting to play it again lately. I would love to use my 3D pieces and justify my purchase.
There you go.
Sure.
So speaking of all day space games, which I was having a very clunky transition to earlier, I got in another play of, I almost had Terraforming Mars, TI4, Twilight Imperium 4.
4th edition.
Twilight Imperium 4th edition. I've been on a real kick with this game. I added it ambitiously to my personal challenge of doing a 10 by 5 in 2024, which is playing 10 games 5 times. And I'm happy to report.
Seems reasonable.
Well, Tom would say you can only do a 4x4 at max. But I have to say, I'm already on 3 plays of Twilight Imperium.
That's 3 Saturdays.
Yeah, and honestly, I have to say this has been a banner week for me because I played Twilight Imperium, I played Railways of the Lost Atlas twice, that's 2 18xx games, and Twilight Imperium in 1 week. And then there was something else I did.
You're back.
I'm back. There was something else I did. I don't remember what it was, but it was awesome. So anyway, we talked about, actually we didn't talk about it. Matt, I think, alluded to it on the ARCs review, which you should all listen to if you want to hear some really interesting thoughts about ARCs.
If you want to hear a good episode.
Well, that was a really good episode because Jordan, Matt, and Drew really laid out a case for why they love ARCs. So, and I know a lot of people are hyped on that game right now, so everyone should listen to it. But we did have actually a very exciting, fun game of Twilight Imperium over July 4th. Which Paul was part of.
Yes, yeah, and infamous for, apparently.
Infamous. Well, Paul had it.
What did you do, Paul?
Like, I think I was completely reasonable.
Do, Paul?
So here's we played with 5 people. It was
6 people.
Oh yes, James came. That's right. There's 6 people. Ben,
James came and won.
Yeah. Ben, me, James, our Matt Robinson, Cassie, and
Jake.
So I think Cassie, she is. I really enjoy playing with her. She's a SpaceX engineer. She and I have a lot of things in common. We both do martial arts. And I go like, oh,
she sounds smart though.
She does, and she is.
Yeah.
And so on paper, we should get along, and we do. But there's also 2 protons kind of repel, and so when we were playing,
you think you have a positive charge?
2 electrons. And so we were playing, and we're side by side. I go, okay, I know that this can be a problem because, we're both very analytical about various things. And eventually we're going to have to go into each other. And there's just no choice about that. And for the first 6 hours, I think we're great.
Everything was swimming along. Everything was wonderful.
But Paul's going to do what Paul's going to do.
So here's the thing. There was a point where I go, I don't want to be the person to be that guy. And so eventually she would go to me, hey, Paul, I need to take that ship. Are you okay if I take that ship? I'm not infringing it, but I just need to get this condition. I need to take that ship. And I go, I can do that. I have enough. And, in the spirit of a friendship, blah, 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 blah.
This is a generous man right here, yeah. Paul Satachet.
But then as the night progressed and as we moved into the second phase of the scoring, she goes to me, I'm going to take that. Don't worry about it. And I go, that's not asking. That's not asking. Like, like I'm going like, I don't feel. I need to set a boundary. And so
if we ever do a Twilight Imperium focused podcast, much like Space Cat Pete's Turtles, I think is what it's called. It's going to be called I Need to Establish a Boundary.
So, like, I just move my pieces, like, right next to her homeworld.
Sure.
And
that's communicating.
Yeah, yes. And my pieces tended to be fairly
chunky,
large.
Paul has large, chunky pieces of plastic.
And my pieces are not insignificant as far as their strength.
Yeah.
And so, so then she goes, "What the hell's that?" And I go, I just don't want you to take this spot, and I want you to move it over into your husband. And then she's like, "No, you're trying to take my homework." I go, No, I'm not. And I'm truly expressing how I feel inside, and she is truly hearing like me gaslight her. And as we're talking to her, it sounds like I'm more and more gaslighting. And when people get upset at me, I tend to be more calm.
Yes. What I perceived as what was happening is Paul was just saying, he was being very like robo, like he's like a robot. He's like, I just moved here simply so that way it would encourage you to move your ships in that direction and attack Jake. That's what he was saying. Yeah. And he was being very like, and I could tell Paul was not being emotional because he was afraid that this was an emotional moment and he was afraid he was going to heighten the emotion if he introduced emotion into it. But actually, I think what was coming across as was Cassie was being told, you have to do this. And she was like, why the hell do I have to do anything that you tell me to do? Right? Like, and so there was, to me, I was watching this miscommunication on Furl, right? Between the two of them.
Here's what Ben isn't saying. It's like everyone else at the table was like going like, Kathy, Paul's screwing with you. And like everyone was laughing and going, "Oh, Paul." Wait.
No, people were doing that. No, people were saying, "Oh, Paul, you really messed up. Paul, you really messed up." Because because the thing is this, Paul, in my estimation, Paul miscalibrated the emotional stake of that moment, which is that Paul thought that by not entering emotion and just saying, I'm doing this, I want you to go after Jake. Paul was like, I'm being rational. I'm being totally honest. I'm being transparent about everything. And I'm not heightening the situation. But it was actually in its lack of emotion. It also showed no care for her emotions.
Yeah. And she started getting Trey-esque. She was very.
Wait. What? Why are you bringing me into this at all?
I'm not saying she wasn't acting like it, but like her emotion level was like she was very. She was
seeing red.
Like she was non-linear.
But at this point, you have not actually transgressed.
This is a Cold War. This is Cuban Missile Crisis.
Right, but you've got a big stack of big chunky things next to her homeworld, and you're saying, I'm not going to use these
exactly
as long as you do what you kind of said you were going to do.
Exactly.
But she never said she was going to go after Jake.
But here's the thing that was really interesting. I was like, when I play these games, I'm very, very transparent. I go like, oh no, I'm manipulating you. I'm moving you so that you do this. Like, and I don't think you have a real choice. And I didn't say those words, but my tone was definitely there.
And the thing is that, so amazingly, she picks up on that and doesn't like it, which is totally fair. Because,
100%.
But by the way, I've totally been in Cassie's shoes. Like, that's, Jordan and I famously butt heads in Twilight Imperium like crazy because he will often pull the same maneuver where he'll say, he'll do something and then I can tell he's trying to manipulate me. He's trying to coerce me to move in a certain area. And what happens is it doesn't become about the game in that moment. In that moment, it's like you think that you get to just call the shots on my game and I have my own strategy and I'm not just going to do, you think you're being sneaky right now. You think you're being clever and your brain, like, that's what happens in your head. And so, like, I totally understood why Cassie was seeing red because Jordan has never been as intense as this moment, but it was like, I know that feeling where you feel like, I don't care like how reasonable you make it sound and how rational you sound. You are at your core still telling me what to do, and I don't want to be told what to do.
And and to her credit, and I don't think I said this to her, but we're fine. Like we hashed it out there. To her credit, she stood down. She passed. She did. Like I was going, oh, she's gonna self annihilate. We're gonna self annihilate. She passed, and she was like, she did the right thing.
Now it was up to you not to.
Yeah.
So
actually betray her, and
but then
there's a but then.
Well, no, it's no but then in terms of like the twists and turns of this game, which is why I love this game. So it's just all like there's all this drama between Paul and Cassie that goes on for like 20 minutes or so. Yeah, it goes on a long time.
It's verging on.
I mean, we're talking about like emotions. Like this is this was an emotional moment. Okay. Sure. It's also going to be a moment we're always going to remember. But then, meanwhile, with
Making
this
moments
game,
with Paul.
So like it's a very frustrating situation for Cassie. But then, as it turns out, Cassie quietly gets herself into this amazing position, and we go into what essentially is the final round, and she has the special this special strategy card called Imperial, which basically means
score twice.
That she can. By using it, she'll be able to get the score she needs to win the game. And she tells everyone at the top of the round, and I don't know if this was a smart move on her part or not, but she goes, guys, I'm going to play this my first turn, and you all have basically one turn left to try to win the game. Otherwise, I'm going to play this and I'm going to win. And I was like, it was kind of one of those things. It's like, wow, this is such an about face, because like it looked so dire for her with this whole situation with Paul. And it was also proof that like when people do these moves and you think like, oh shit, like it's over. I had my whole plan was going to go in that system. Like there's still another way. But as it turns out, that I think the reason why it was not smart for Cassie to announce that was because it lit a fire under James, and he did his James magic, and he found a way.
James finds a way, just like
and James out of nowhere, not totally out of nowhere, but James won the game, and so it was a very dramatic and twisty turny.
No, I talked to Cassie afterwards, and she was like, the reason why she was so upset is because there was, for any other eventuality, she had ways to defend. But this was the one back door that she had to choose something. And this was the door that she goes like, oh, I feel safe with Paul. And if I had really gone through, this was the one way to get through her defenses. So there was a lot of stakes for her.
Yeah, I have to tell you, that game stuck in my brain for like 2 days because I actually had a chance to win the game. Like I had it like this close, and I hedged. Like I just had to like move one more piece of plastic into a system, and I would have had this epic come from behind win. Like I was playing this faction called the Virus, which just by the name of it, anytime you play the Virus, you're always the enemy of the table because you leech off of other people's powers. And I was playing the Virus, and I had to play a really strong social game. Because my faction is inherently maligned in the game, people hate it. You have to just be so friendly with people at like above level. And I had to go push against every instinct I ever I normally have to be like snarky or clever or withholding or be like, I just had to be like the friendliest Virus you ever saw. And I was like, I was so mad that I almost pulled off this amazing come from behind victory. And I just whiffed at the last second, and I was like,
a few pieces of plastic short.
I was like, oh my God, that really haunted me.
Like, I think everyone had a chance, to win.
Trey has a question.
Yes.
Trey has a question.
No. Just, I thank you for telling that story. Yeah. I think it's a good story. It also goes back to like the beginning of our gaming group.
Sure.
And our playing of Wildlife and the Croc. And just like, there really is a thing like table image that we have as players. And I think what you were just talking about there, Ben, is like this game kind of lends itself almost to like a certain degree of LARPing. And that barrier between almost like what's the role I'm playing in this game versus like what is your actual character as a person. A lot of times like that barrier is very thin, and it is easy it's easy for like hard feelings from a game to bleed over to something else, especially because a lot of times it is deserved.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of what we're talking about. Sometimes it's like sometimes you have to lose the game you're playing in order to win the longer game of how people are going to treat me at the table in our relationship going forward. And especially because this will be fun to throw someone else under the bus. Like, I think that's kind of one of the thing with Jordan, a lot of times Jordan can be very aggressive on the board, but as far as your relations with him at the table, he wants to act like he has not been. And that disconnect is often maddening. And like you were calling, like it feels like a little bit of gaslighting. It's like, Jordan, you're often early, aggressive, very early. And like, that's fine, but just don't pretend like you weren't. Like, that's the thing that often is what I can't take is.
Well, the funny thing with Jordan is that he is literally the sweetest person.
Yeah,
like you talk with him and he is just this big, kind, like puppy dog who just wants to come with like a frisbee and just play, and he's just so sweet. And then you play games with him and he's
murderer. Very early on, like I played with him. I think I played with him the first time or a second within the first 2 games. I was like, oh, he's a murderer. And I was like, no, Jordan's a murderer, everyone. And like everyone's like, he's just so nice. Watch what
if Jordan were on this episode, he would say, I don't necessarily agree with that, but that's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, right.
I will say, so anyway, believe it or not, I wasn't actually intending to talk about this game that we just talked about this session. Sure. What I really wanted to say was that I had a 3-player game 2 weeks later with James. And I won't go in the weeds with it because we just spent a lot of time talking about the other one. But I played with James and our friend Nick, and anyone who watches Twilight Imperium. Like, there's like the video that Shay does from Rado, and Nick is Shay's, like, he's like this, not
support.
He's the support on the show on the video. So some of you may recognize Nick from that. So James, Nick, and I played, and I really, the thing that's so fun with Twilight Imperium is that you do have all these different races you can play, factions, and also each faction has different technologies, and there's just different, each faction on its own has so many levers to pull, and then there's so many factions that you can play with. It's just a shame that you have to wait once or twice a year to have these big event games to play with the fun that comes in this box. And so I've decided that, like, one of my goals is to have more fun with Twilight Imperium and not be so focused on that it has to be 6 players. Mm-hmm. So did a 3-player game. And it was so fun, and it was really affirming to me. It just made me feel so happy to know that, like, yes, at the full player count, and actually 6 is not even the full player count with Prophecies of the King. You can actually go up to 8 players, which I've never done. But like, it's just nice to know you can play this game and still pull so much value from it and have so much fun with it. I thought it was equally as epic. I thought all my decisions were extremely there were tough decisions, just like you have with a 6-player game. In fact, where it is a little different is that one thing that happens is in Twilight Imperium, before sort of every round, everyone picks a special power that they're going to be able to use during the round. And when you have 3 or 4 players, everyone gets to take 2 of those powers instead of just 1. So that initial draft actually becomes much more interesting, because it's like, which was the one, like, I want 2 powers, which is the one that I think I could, like, push my luck on and get on the second round. Mm-hmm. A lot of cool stuff. Now, the 3-player game, admittedly, our 3-player game went about 9 hours. But I don't think that's the norm. We have, like, the part of the issue, and of course James won again, because that was now his 5th game in a row he's won of Twilight Imperium. I think the issue why it took so long is James has a record to defend, so he is considering everything. So he is sitting there, his computer brain is like calculating everything. And Nick and James are really good friends, and I think Nick, whenever it's like a situation like this, I think that Nick feels compelled to dethrone James. And so now Nick is contemplating everything. And boy, the 2 of them really thought about things a lot. So
that's a very diplomatic way of saying it, Ben. Well done.
But let me tell you something. It was so fun. Like, if you're going to have 2 people who are going to, like, every single point and
watching people think can be so enjoyable.
But it actually wasn't so much about thinking. There was a lot of discussion. So it was like actually a very active experience.
Yeah, interactive kind of.
Oh. So it was like every little thing is like, well, should I buy another fighter? Well, James, what do you think? If I buy this fighter, are you going to go into that hex? Well, let me see. Is there something in that hex that you would want? Well, I don't know. Is there something you'd want in that hex? Ben, would you want that hex? I don't know. Maybe I want that hex. And it goes like that. Like, every small decision became a discussion. So it wasn't even like that there was analysis paralysis. It was just that, like, everything was debated because no one wanted to cede an inch about anything. So I don't think it would normally be 9 hours, but I'm just here to say
But it was.
It was. And let me tell you something. It was so fun. It was just so fun. So I just want to let people know you can still play this game at 3 players and have a great time.
Like after we played our 6, like Matt was going like, "Why do we play anything else?" You know, that's his.
He always, that's his thing.
When he really likes the game, is like, you know, it's really like it gets to it really quick. I don't know if you can ever say a 14-hour game gets to it really quick, but like you're living in what the game is, at the joy of that game really quick, and it's really fun. Like, it's worth it. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, I think the map is a little, with 3 players, the map is a little funkier. You actually have more solar systems between you and other players, so you can actually kind of build up your resources a little bit more. You can actually be a little wealthier, and so that adds a different dynamic too. But just to anyone who is sitting there with a dusty copy of Twilight Imperium on their shelves, struggling to get 6 people together, start with 3 and just have fun with it. And actually, some people on Reddit, I looked it up.
Throw together a 9-hour game.
Throw together. I think that like with 3 players, you most of the time you could probably do it in like 5 to 6 hours. But I'm telling you, like one thing is that on Reddit, someone said the benefit of doing it at 3 players, a 3-player count, is that you will most likely convert people to the game, and then they'll want to play and they'll want to bring people in. So it's also a good way to,
like a cult.
Yeah, to cult it up. Yeah. Paul, have you played? Well, I guess we just talked about Twilight Imperium a lot. Trey, tell us about Pampero, by the way. Can we talk about Ellen Pampero?
I've been watching Grey's Anatomy, or B has, like, you know, she's trying to get us to be Grey's Anatomy people, and I'm not so much, although it's better than, like, you know, it's elevated basic.
Well, okay, so Paul, you and I right now in our group have played it the most, which is to say that we've only played it twice.
Yes.
And I think we were kind of gearing up towards possibly doing a review of this at some point. I'm not sure that we're actually going to. Mostly because I think when we do reviews, a lot of times I really like championing games.
Mm-hmm, sure.
And I'm not sure I can bring myself to play this a third time.
Yeah.
I was really excited. I mean, I was really excited about this game. I tend to buy any game that seems to have kind of a global warming theme, like
climate change, baby.
Climate change games. Like I'm definitely, because part of what I do professionally, I always want to see what these are and how they handle it. And I think sometimes these games that look like they might be climate change games, Pampero, it's actually just kind of like a running a company.
Yeah,
game.
I can see that.
And Salton Sea kind of fell in that same category. It's like there's kind of some environmental things, but actually mechanically, like you're running your company in Salton Sea. But this was a big Kickstarter. This is a game from Julian Pombo. The art was done by Ian O'Toole. It's a beautifully put together game. It's a huge, heavy box full of
enormous box
full of wooden pieces. And in this game, you are essentially operating a power company in Uruguay as they kind of transition to renewable energy. And so you kind of start off and you're putting up, wind turbines and establishing electrical infrastructure, and you spread around.
It's all wind turbines, right? Like it's wind.
Yeah, it's wind, but the game isn't just about building turbines. You also kind of have to build an infrastructure in terms of the electrical towers.
Yeah.
But it just ends up being a ton of wood,
which is perfect for a game about sustainability and green, right?
It has some interesting mechanisms in it. It also has just a lot of stuff going on. And I think we've felt like the interactivity has not been really high. It's a big setup. It takes a long time to kind of get it on the table. It takes a long time to teach it all. It takes a long time to break it down and to get it into all of its proper containers to put it back inside of its huge box. And so this really isn't like it's a negative review. I don't think it is a terrible game by any stretch, but it also
And yet your tone.
I know. I'm like,
but it is one of these like the juice does not seem to be worth the squeeze. There is a lot of squeezing you have to do with this game, and it's not doing the things that I think typically excite me. Of the interaction levels are bad, and then I have some like getting into the weeds. I think there's some king making elements in it that are problematic.
Is it so you're building like an electric, like a power infrastructure, and
You're selling energy.
you sell energy, and then like what is the interaction point? What are the interaction points?
Like, first of all, like I'm on more on the other side of the spectrum than Trey, and we'll discuss that. So I actually like it. Like what you wind up doing, when you ask about interaction, like, do you remember CO2?
Yes.
Yeah. So like one of the core elements of CO2 is you can't do everything by yourself. It requires a certain collaboration of sorts. And the way that Pampero kind of does this is you basically have your bulldozers, but like they're basically markers to say, I have this spot. And you can pay the bank to use your own spot, or you can pay another person to use their spot.
And these are finite.
And so there can be a bit of collaboration in playing it. And I have found, in the way I see it, like using that collaboration, the game moves a lot easier. For you get more stuff and things. The grease is there.
Well, the money is not leaving the economy.
Exactly.
So everyone as a group is more flush and they can get more done.
If you participate in that way, like we played with our second game, we played with Jennifer and Bruce, and for whatever reason, and I push back against it. Like Jennifer goes, like, that's not how you're supposed to play the game. I go, like, I think it's exactly
like you're not supposed to collaborate.
When you pay someone to use their bulldozer, the money, rather than leaving the game, is going to the other person. And the end of the game, money is points.
Right.
And so say each of us have a cost of 10 to do a thing. And on my turn, I pay Paul 10 to use his spot. And then on his turn, he pays me 10 to do my spot. We essentially just built for free.
Exactly.
Based on our relationship, rather than each of us paying $10 to the bank and removing $20 from the economy of the game. So if you're trying to cooperate, you can actually kind of like really juice your own economy. But this seems to be something that in other groups don't do, or feel like they're incapable of doing.
And what was really interesting, because like like I feel like Lacerda in CO2. I'm not a big fan of CO2, but like part of it was going like, oh, we need to do this together. Like, like if you talk about the narrative of CO2, like, like, oh, we need to save the planet and we have to do it together. Like, we can't do it by ourselves. It's not good. And so I played like that with this. I go like, oh, well, we can't do this together. Or from just an economic standpoint, like, it's good. It's not worth it. It's more in my incentive to help Trey, and Trey help me. And so in that way, watching two people who wouldn't do that versus two people who would do that, like the scores were vastly different, right? Vastly different. And
lower, higher.
Like I crushed, but it wasn't the fact that I crushed.
You're not a player. You just crush a lot. There we go. It came back. And it was used more properly.
Ben's back, baby. Coffee pocket.
Well, talk about a big
we were
pun.
rewarded for the limited. We did some collaboration, and it rewarded us greatly.
Yeah. But like, Jennifer and Bruce, they refused to do it. And you could see that it reflected in the points because their money was leaving the economy.
Exactly.
And and for me, I'm going like, oh, this is really, like, as far as narrative about like climate change and global warming, like, it really is cool to say like, oh, in Lacerda's game, like, I go like, oh, this it's trying, but it's not achieving to make me go like, want to do this. I still want to like make sure no one really, gets ahead. But like, anyway,
let me disagree with you on CO2, because I thought CO2 was really fascinating, and I remember playing
by
it
the way,
with you.
Team CO2.
I completely find fascinating.
You have held
all the cool
playing
kids
games
like
with
it.
You have held the table hostage because you turned it, because it is a prisoner's dilemma game.
Sure.
And you were insisting it's like, I need to have a path. You guys need to provide me a pathway to victory, or else we're all going to lose.
Yes.
And like that seemed like a really excellent metaphor for the
100%.
problem facing us. I'm not sure Pampero asked the same question.
I think Pampero says, like, if you work together, you will be rewarded in this. But if you play a more like protective game, like you're going to lose. Other
than like I've been on the forums and most people act like the way we're playing is some quirk of our social group, and that most people don't play that way. So I don't feel like
but if the rule is
this
there,
is a space that the designer is actively encouraging people to. And the designer's quite active on the forums there too.
And my question is like, I don't see how people aren't playing it our way. I think mathematically it's just better.
It's just stronger.
This is not a matter of like, oh, I feel this. Like I can show you in the math. You should do this. And so I wonder if it's just like an entrenched type of thinking that has really like it's a metaphor for our society. Like there's this entrenched thinking that really there's a better way, and yet we won't do it. And I was really surprised when Jennifer was so adamant about it. She was so adamant. Like
she thought we were breaking the game.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if the rule is there, if that's a functionality.
The game doesn't have anything to say about like deals between players or anything like that. Like this is kind of like once you play diplomacy.
Exactly.
mechanically you absolutely
mechanically you're allowed to do it, then like it's
an emergent
implied.
Meta. Yeah. Like the game is fragile though. I feel like the game is fragile.
Okay.
And so like if you like one of the reasons why Trey and I won or like were real high is because
separation,
because there was this part where like, oh, I can choose these end game condition cards or other cards, and then we were just in a position because of money and blah 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 to just between the two of us split like basically all of them
by all the end game victory.
They were limited
contracts
because you had more cash to buy. I guess
exactly, and so in that way, I go like, oh, I don't think this is a good design. Like there should be a rail to prevent that.
There were a lot of things in that game that felt like, oh, this hasn't really been play tested.
Oh, sure,
the cards seemed tremendously unbalanced at times. I don't know. There's just a lot of things that kind of felt like, oh, they haven't really put this through its paces.
Like, or like the strategies that we were employing, either there aren't counter strategies, or they haven't, or we haven't found them. But like, I don't know with these end game cards. Like normally a game would just go like, you can only have 3. You know, like like it's a simple fix. So
score your best 3 cards.
So and that would make it so that like, you know, oh, other people have them and it'll be tighter, compressed. But it was not the case here. And I was like, oh, well, I don't understand why this isn't the case. Here is a runaway situation that really is like, there's a point where about maybe 60% through the game when Trey and I were splitting these, I was like, oh, like Jennifer and Bruce are locked out. They're done.
Yeah.
There's no way that they can cut because they don't have.
And then that led to a certain amount of checkout.
Yeah.
Also emotionally, because they're watching us do cool things. Then they're like, "How do you have so much money?" Well, we told you.
Yeah.
This is how you get a lot of money.
And like it's just really. So I feel like it's breakable, but I think there are simple changes that could make it less so. Like, you know, I found it interesting. I found it
interesting. I thought it was kind of like it's an interesting failed experiment. Like it just didn't like it's not going to be something that's going to be played 10 years from now a lot. I mean, unless I'm really missing something. Yeah. It's asking too much. It feels a little bloated. I'm going to relate this a little bit to like I kind of viewed the cost as a failed experiment, but the cost at least had really something to say and was engaging with its subject.
Yeah.
This one I'm not sure does. And
was this more of a setting than a theme?
No, it does a lot of that stuff pretty well. Like I'm really not that negative on a lot of the things into it. I think that there's some interesting tile design. It's also just a lot. And like it's got to be an expensive box. It's a big, heavy,
it's giant
box.
I would say for me, I don't see how you can fix the cost as far as the gameplay. Like as you know,
but it's almost like an art piece. Like it's designed
100%.
I also want to say
that and you feel bad.
I also want to say, by the way, just as a side note, I did get to play the cost in person about a year ago, and it's significantly better in person than it is on TTS, which is when we played it and reviewed it. And in person, yes, the flaws are there, but the game comes alive much more. The social element, the deal making feels much more vibrant.
I think it's an interesting game.
So I just want to put that out there.
I think Pampero, and we haven't played with the animals, so I don't know. But like, I feel like the game could be fixed. You know, I don't know if there's any interest in it, but like, I feel like, I can see how this could. There are a lot of things that I enjoy about it, but maybe it's because I'm winning.
You know,
you understand it better than other people.
Trey, speaking of environmental games, etc., did we talk about this? A game that was recently on Kickstarter called "We All Take from the River."
I don't know anything about it.
It's actually a game I backed.
Really?
Mm-hmm. I backed
Fishing
this
games.
game. Yeah, it's not it's the game is called "We All Take from the River," and the designer, it's a first-time designer, which makes me nervous because, for a variety of reasons.
People have a chance, though.
Yeah, you know what though? If I remember correctly, and because I was not planning to talk about this, but I believe, works in DC as maybe an environmental lobbyist or something like that, or he has some sort of connection to environmental policy, or at least to policy making. And he's also a board gamer, and he designed this game that there's like a river, and we all are taking from it. We all have like settlements on the river, and we are sort of building out things on the river. And in order to build out the things on the river, we have to take
Ben Hammer.
Ben Hammer. We have to take things from the river, like, I don't know, maybe it's fish or this or that. And what happens is, as the table collectively takes from the river
starts dying.
Yeah, I mean the river. Part of it is like, if you overfish, there's consequences.
Yeah. Love
if you cut down, if you do too much deforestation, then you imperil maybe the wetlands.
Sure.
And I watched.
That's right. I did see this on Kickstarter. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched a playthrough, and I watched like almost the whole thing, and I thought it was like really fascinating, and I really enjoyed it. It looks very Kickstarter-y. Like there were some elements I was like, I can imagine some people get like, there's some elements that seemed a little fiddly, but I absolutely love any game that has like a dynamic quality where what the people at the table are doing affects the game state, which is why I love Hegemony so much, and like something like On the Underground, where like there's like a collective thing. And so I love the idea of like all of everything that we're doing is impacting this river, this ecosystem, and a literal ecosystem in this case. But more importantly, that this is, it is a commentary about, relationship with
environmental exploitation
and water and environmental exploitation. So if you're interested in environmental games, definitely check out that Kickstarter. I'm sure that you can get like a late pledge or something like that.
That's right. They have a site where you can kind of do a late pledge.
Yeah, I wish there was more content available for it. I wish there were more videos, because I just think I think the theme is great.
Yeah, I know.
And I think the gaming concept behind it is great. And whether or not it'll actually be fun, who knows? But it looked pretty fun when I was watching it. So.
It's supposed to deliver April 2025.
Well, we hope. I want to talk about, speaking of fish, by the way, I want to talk about real quickly. I'm not going to go so far in depth with the other things I played, but this week I played some Concordia Classic, and I played a different board. I played the Balearica board. Is that how you pronounce it? Balearica, which is the region that comprises Majorca, Menorca, and Ibiza. Ibiza. This is like, I feel like I've now played several games that have taken place on Majorca recently. There's El Burro, there's this game, and there was some other game that took place on Majorca. I don't know what's happening, but Majorca, hotbed of gaming activity. Anyway, the point is this. The map was very fun, very interesting, fun little quirks that it added to it. But more importantly, this is my first time playing with the fish market module for Concordia. So the fish market was introduced with this map. I got this map, I think, in 2019. So it took me 5 years to get this one to the table.
Do the queue.
Yeah, a lot of games in the queue right now. But the fish market was really interesting because what it does. Have you ever played with the fish market, Trey? Because you play Concordia.
Yeah, I haven't played with the fish market. Played with the salt.
Salt is great. Was that a happy face or a sad face that you made? Do you like the salt?
I'd like the base game.
Okay. Well, the fish market does something very interesting, which is that it takes the prefect action. For those who may be a little rusty, the prefect action is where you play a card and then you take a bonus good from this like mini map, and then all your settlements in a certain region will produce goods for you. So, and then if it flips over to a coin side, the little bonus good thing, and then if there's so many coins taken, you can decide to take coins instead.
Right.
So in this case, no bonus goods. Instead, what you have are fish. And and that's it, everyone.
Nice.
And we're Game
fish.
Brain, like produced by.
You just get fish, and at the end of the game, it's the exact same game, but at the end, you just might have a pile of fish.
Okay.
No, what it's actually basically what it does is it introduces a sub rondel to this game, which is already kind of like an informal rondel. And what you do is your provinces still produce like normal, but you just again you don't get a bonus good. So like if you really want that cloth, but you haven't built a cloth city, you can't just go prefect and get a cloth from the bonus good.
Right.
You just get
Fish.
Instead,
When
I
need-
get this fish.
When I need clothes, sometimes I just get fish.
Yeah, sometimes. So, I mean, I almost wish they called this the fresh fish module.
That's right.
But also, when you reset the prefect and take the money, then what happens is all the fish that were left over on the prefect flip over, and now they're 2 fish. So now the areas that you did not get fish from become even fishier.
Double fish. That's right.
Well, you are selling me.
And then on top of that, when you take the money, we do the money option, you get to take a good of your choice. So that makes the money option sexier. But anyway, you're probably thinking, what do I do with all these fish? Well, this is where
Get out of my head.
this is where the sub rondel comes from. So you have this sub rondel that has imagine Iki. It literally it's like the Concordia version of Iki. You have all these market stalls, and the idea is that you are going to the market stalls and you're handing in fish and you're getting stuff back. And what you have, like at one market stall, it may be like spend a fish and get a wheat, or maybe spend a fish and you can have your choice of a wine or a cloth. But maybe you might spend 2 fish and maybe you'll buy a card from the market.
Ooh.
Or maybe you'll spend a fish and you'll do like a single architect action, build a settlement. Or maybe you'll spend a fish and do X, Y, and Z. So all of a sudden, like now what you get from the prefect, you put it into this fish market, and you go into the fish market at the start of your turn, every single turn. So, but the thing is, you always have to move you have to always step forward. You can never just stay in the same place. So you can always go one step, but if you want to go farther, you put coins down on the fish market. So if you want to go like 3 stalls down, you put like 2 coins down, you get to the 3rd stall.
People pick up those coins.
And people pick up the coins. And so this... Trey, what are your thoughts so far?
I guess I'd have to try it. I'm just excited about how excited you are about the fish and the coins.
Well, first of all, I love anything that involves fish. Okay. So, but I have to say, this was wild.
No, I don't know. Like, when was this? Is this a new expansion or how?
It came out like 2018 or 19.
Okay,
it's
so
not that new at this point.
Yeah.
At this point, I think it was. I don't know. It was just these maps come out. There was a pandemic.
For clarity, earlier I kind of said I like the base game. It's actually one of my top 5 games, Concordia.
It's my number 1.
Yeah, so I love Concordia. I would totally play this. I just think like the expansions haven't added. Like the Venus was kind of interesting for more people.
I actually have not played Venus yet, but I think Salt is great. I actually love the forum tiles. Some people are mixed. Some people feel like they're swingy. I think they're great.
Okay.
So
sometimes more is more.
Sometimes more is more. Maybe you know what this needs? Concordia Prelude.
That's right.
But to tie them all together, Fish Market though to me is the first major expansion beyond the forum tiles. I don't consider Venus as an expansion. It's just a different game.
Sure.
But this was such a fascinating expansion. So I played with my friend Daria. Daria and I have played Concordia millions of times. Like she's like it's her number 1 game. She's like my Concordia go-to. And we both really liked it a lot. It makes it so much. It's so much harder. It makes it much thinkier. It's already a thinky game, but you're now all of a sudden you can't just like get resources easily. Suddenly it's like it's a 2-step process. You have to do the prefect, and then you got to go to the fish market, and you have to hope you're in the right spot in the fish market. And if you're not in the right spot, you're hoping you have enough money to get to the right spot. But then maybe it actually works out because now it's like, oh, I have an opportunity to build a little house right here. And it's both much tougher to get resources and it's more, I guess you could say, I don't know if it's more tactical, but it definitely adds a layer of, I don't want to say heaviness, but it does add, it adds just another layer of gameplay on it in a way that I thought was really fascinating. And there's actually 2 different markets. The other market works in a different way. I won't get into it, but
not on Mallorca.
But you can use it with all the maps. But it was cool to use it with Mallorca, the Mallorca map or the Balearica map. There was some fun rules on that. So anyway, the point is this: check it out. Check out the fish market. I think people would like it. I think you would like it, Trey. I think it adds. It definitely. It's not that
like
fussy.
you. I love a good fish market.
Yeah. And it doesn't add so much rules overhead. It's not like it's not something. It doesn't feel like it fundamentally changes the game. It just makes. It adds wrinkles in a really good way. So it was fun to see a classic kind of get some zhuzhing up, you know.
Paul and I have been playing some Age of Innovation.
No,
like
you're not. So you guys never play that game.
Like,
well, I wasn't.
So every week Ben sends out a text saying, what games are you most interested in?
Which, by the way, you should all follow Game Brain on Instagram because I'm just trying to move the needle to get it to 1,000, followers. And like, goodness, it is difficult. It is difficult. Board game content does not really take off in the same way as other content, I have to say.
And like every week, since the beginning, I have put Age of Innovation on my top 5. This is the first week
it cracked.
It did not. No, it did. I didn't put it on.
Didn't put it on there.
Yeah, but it got up to number 2, didn't it?
Because everyone else was. Because like BGA, put out Age of Innovation in beta, and like everyone wants to play it. And like Matt, Jordan, Trey, and I have been like I have at one point I had 3 games going simultaneously. I'm getting no work done, but I don't need to. I'm not so eager to play Age of Innovation anymore, because except for the fact
you're saturated.
No, you actually responded with a parenthetical, and you were like, "I did not put on Age of Innovation this week because I've been playing it so much."
Yeah, and but I think everyone, I think Matt and Jordan, for whatever reason, because it's an amazing game, put it as his best game of 2023. But I would have to bully him to play it, and. Now Matt and Trey are on board, and I believe, I don't want to speak for you, but you really like it.
It's clicked with me now.
Yeah. And
before it just seemed like, this really isn't that different. Mm-hmm. And I always liked Terra Mystica, but
I respected it.
Yeah,
I like Age of Innovation. I'm just not excited by it, but I really like it a lot. Sure. I need to play it some more. I want to play more Gaia Project too, by the way.
Sadly, it lends itself to me staring at the board for a long time and maximizing.
I thought you were going to say, sadly, it lends itself to Paul pointing his finger in your face going, "Ha, I beat you."
Well, here's the thing. Everyone is getting good so quick. Everyone, Matt, we're playing this one game, me, Matt, and Jordan, and Matt was doing this one move for round 1. I was going oh man, this is really advanced stuff in the sense that it broke my best practice / meta. And I go, oh crap, I'm not, I'm having to reevaluate.
It has a lot of paths that are not.
And I'm probably the one who's played it the most, in our group. But Matt is loving it. He's going aside from Agricola, this is the game.
You need to say that about TA4?
Exactly.
What about arcs?
They're tiers.
Oh, right.
They're tiers.
Listen, I love Matt's enthusiasm. Matt is one of the people in our group that when he's enthusiastic about something, is so infectious because it comes from a true
joy of it.
And that's how gaming should be. Is that you play a game and you're like, guys, there's no other game right now. I don't understand why we're not playing any other game than this. And that's a fun feeling. That's part of the reason why it's great to be in this hobby.
So I think we're at the cusp, at a point where the meta is going to change. And right now I think we've been playing everyone's going to build their empire and blow. And now I think like people have enough reps and understanding. Go, now we're going to cut each other off.
I need to start playing reps. I just have not the idea of like sitting and playing on BGA Age of Innovation. It hasn't been appealing to me.
Oh yeah,
but
We're
I want to play it
async.
more.
Yeah,
and it doesn't actually lend itself especially well because of the whole power gain thing.
Yeah,
there's a lot of little steps that keep us from kind of like your turn, then my turn, then your turn.
I just am like not in async mode right now.
Sure. No,
I just don't. I'm just not there
we
yet,
just
guys.
finished the game and it was like 10 days.
Yeah.
Should I mention, by the way, as long as I mentioned this, like games on the brain for the weekend, this is the current, like what our group, this is the top 5 according to our group. Because I really have fun compiling these every week. It's really fun to see what everyone chooses and then seeing how it all shakes out. Number 5 this week was Arcs, which is weird. Arcs has been,
yeah. Oh wow,
Arcs has been like at number 1 for a while. I should also say the methodology for this is that I text everyone and I say like, what are like the 5 games that you're most like excited about or on your brain, whatever. And then the games, the way I break it down is the priority is number of votes, and then after that it's the amount. I assign point values. Like if it's like your number 1, the game you're most excited about, then it's like that gets like 5 points or something like that.
So if something gets 3 mentions and that's the most, then it's number 1.
Then it's going to do better than something that's 2. It used to be the other way, and the reason why is because it occurred to me that like sometimes I'm like just as excited. Like my number 1, like I'm really excited about that, and well, I'm also really excited about my number 4. But I feel like if there are like 3 people who are like, yeah, this game's on my radar this week, I feel like that is much more, that represents more a group excitement than like if 2 people. What was happening was a lot of times 2 people would really like something like Avalon, and then Avalon would be like number 1 or 2.
No, say Netrunner. Avalon's perfect.
There was Netrunner there, but there are times where like 2 people, and it's like, does this represent like what the whole group is feeling right now? It's like just because 2 people ranked it highly, it doesn't. That sort of does not represent the group. Whereas if you have multiple people, like this game has landed on multiple people's radars, I think that is a more accurate representation of like what's exciting for us as a group.
Sure.
So that's why I changed it.
I love your methodology.
So that's why I changed it to per person.
Did not know that was the methodology though, because I often only give 3 because I'm like, my 4th and 5th are only going to get a few points, so they don't matter anyway. Did not know the methodology.
Life
I'm
not
like,
always
my number 1 is worth 5 points, so I can push this.
Oh,
so
well.
I did not know.
I didn't realize. I thought you were just like, I don't feel like coming up with 2 other ones. So here's my 3. So that's why I never told you, like, and that's why I never was like, oh, you should do this because of that, this and that. But I think actually, though, it's been fine. Because a lot of times I think these have been very accurate.
Yeah, I understand. It's probably right because we did have those like Netrunner weeks, and like it might be reflective of what a couple of people are doing. Well, it was not what the group
if
was
two
doing.
people, if 2 people play a game together, and then the 2 of them are really excited about it because they just played it together, they want to play it again, and they both put it as like their number 1,
but that
and no one
how
else
they
does.
Build excitement with us. It's like it's their number 1. We should be paying attention to. Hey,
no, but it'll still
register.
Chances are it'll still register. Yeah. But like I don't think it's as reflective. Like if Paul and Dimitri both say they're like number 1 is going to be Avalon, which has happened before.
Yeah.
Then all of a sudden, and then let's say Tom puts it as his number 5, then Avalon has a pretty good score. And it's like, I don't think honestly our whole group is as excited about Avalon.
That's 3 people.
Well, the 3 peopleness of it would get it to rank, but it wouldn't be number 1.
Fair.
So anyway,
it's good to know. I will never put Avalon on my top 5 again because that was like putting it on my 5th sometimes, being like it's a throwaway. It's like
I mean, but is it like something that's like? Is it something that you're
looking forward to it?
I mean,
I'm looking forward to seeing my friend.
Well, there's also disagreement about what does this mean. And for a moment there, it started to get in the weeds, and I just said, just whatever it means to you, because like it really should be. The spirit is like, oh, here's a game I've been really thinking about a lot, and I really can't wait to play it this weekend. Or if I could play it, if I had the copy in front of me, I'd play it. Like it hasn't even shipped yet, or I've just heard about it, but this is something I'm really excited about. So number 5 is Arcs this week. TI4 was actually tied at number 3 with Terraforming Mars Prelude 2. And then Age of Innovation was number 2. And number 1 was Railways of the Lost Atlas. And that got four different people were interested in that one. So, and the rest all had 3.
So that was actually reflective of our gameplay.
I think it was.
Yeah.
I think it was. In fact, I think we actually should start talking about Railways of the Lost Atlas.
One last thing about Age of Innovation. Like,
yes,
the one thing about the BGA that I am slightly disappointed in is like they don't give the option of the snake draft for when you're drafting. And if you play it live, I would recommend that you snake draft with including the bonus tile. So you snake.
Is that in the official rules that it's supposed to be a snake draft or no?
It's an alternate, I believe.
Oh. Maybe you can write something in the forums on BGA.
But I've always found, like, I maintain that the game is in the drafting. That's where the goodness of the game really lies. Right. Yes, everything else is amazing, blah blah blah. But that's where the most fun.
The game's built that way.
Yeah, I say all the time. We could just spend a whole game night and just draft, and then put our positions out, and then go, okay, it looks like Trey would have won, and then we just redo that again because everything else could be viewed as.
I mean, some of this is to tease you, but like looking at the game we're playing right now, do you feel like the game is somewhat decided?
No.
You're okay with your position?
I think I'm gonna be fine.
Okay.
Paul, how do you feel about the fact that if you had put Age of Innovation on your weekly list, it most likely would have been number one for the first time ever?
I'm not excited about it.
It could have finally hit number one. Right. I have actually not been charting which ones. I've been keeping tabs of everyone's votes for the year because I'm thinking that maybe I might try to like crunch the numbers and see like what game was the one that like generated the most excitement. And I think it'll probably be something between Arcs and Inventions and Netrunner. I think those three will be the ones. Those were the ones that seem to pop up the most. But anyway, enough about that. Everyone go follow on Instagram at GameBrainPod because it's really fun to compile those lists every week and see how that all shakes out. So I was going to talk about some other games, but like we talked so much about these games that like I'm just going to table the other ones for other episodes. I was also going to talk about games I saw are coming out or going to be at Gen Con, but we can talk about that next week because Gen Con is next week. So everyone, just consider that a promo for next week's episode. It also means that we will definitely have an episode next week. So congratulations.
You've just committed us.
I've committed us all to another episode, and we'll figure out what it is. But in the meantime, let's pivot over to Railways of the Lost Atlas. This is designed... Yes, sorry. Paul lost his breath there for a moment.
It took my breath away. I didn't lose my breath.
Yes. It's designed by Kevin Delger or Delger, probably Delger, and Jacob Schacht. Art by Studio Delger. If I remember reading somewhere, I think that Kevin Delger may be a graphic designer. Don't quote me on that. It feels like it because this game has really sharp graphic design in the way that it feels like one of the designers was a graphic. Like when someone is a graphic designer,
simple and elegant.
You could tell it came directly from like the creator's brain.
It's like minimalism in a good way.
Yep. Okay. So this game, I'm going to tell the listeners what this game is as if they have no context on 18xx, because I think that's the spirit of this game. But this game is basically an 18xx game. It is a game that I believe is really one of the mandates behind it, I believe, is to kind of bring people into 18xx or at least be accessible to people who don't know about 18xx. So if you are just hearing about the game for the first time now, or if you came here because you heard about this game, but you don't really know anything about 18xx, I'm going to give you the top level view of it. The skinny, okay? In 18xx games, and in fact, I'm not even going to say 18xx. I'm just talking about Railways of the Lost Atlas. You are an investor in trains, and we're in some sort of mythical land called Atlas. It's a land that we create. So we build a map, and then we play on that map, much like on Twilight Imperium and many other games. We are all investors in railway companies. Therefore, we are buying stock in people's different railway companies. And if you have the most stock in a company, you are therefore the president of that company. And as president of the company, you are then in charge of dealing with that company's operations, such as building tracks for its trains, buying the trains, having the trains run on those tracks and generate revenue. And that revenue will come back. You will decide as president, hey, let's pay out dividends to all the stockholders. And you're also a big stockholder in that company. So you're going to get some money from those dividends. And you take those dividends and you reinvest them back in the stock market, wherein you invest in more of your own companies, You also invest in your other players' companies, or maybe you just start up a new company, and then now you are operating 2 different companies and building 2 different train tracks and dealing with 2 different sets of railroads. And rinse and repeat. And through it all, as you invest in the stock rounds, and then as you use the money, your company receives money in the stock rounds and then operates in the operating rounds to generate even more money. It's going to go back and forth, making more and more money. And at the end of the game, whoever has the most cash on hand, as well as whoever has the best portfolio of stocks, is going to win the game. Yeah. Yes. So that's what it is. You're just trying to make money in a mythical place.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. Or like
that's what it's about.
Yeah, no, like for the gamers who play game, it's you're either playing a portfolio game or an operations game, and this one it's more portfolio. I think that but like 18xx, it really hits it.
Yep. So it's basically about you're basically building a map, you're working on a map, and you're investing in other players. What I always say with games like these, the pitch I have to people who've never played a game like this, and seasoned players of this genre may not like this pitch, but I think this is the pitch that always gets people in the right mind space to play it. As I say, you probably played Ticket to Ride,
Okay, just a small leap from Ticket to Ride.
Just brace yourself. You probably played Ticket to Ride, wherein you're building paths across the country, right? And what if I told you when you're playing Ticket to Ride, you could invest in other players? Like, hey, Trey is doing really well. I want to buy a stock of Trey, and every time he builds a route between two regions, I get a little kickback. I get a little something. And maybe he wants to invest in me. And maybe I say, I'm doing really badly, but I'm going to invest a lot in Paul, so it won't matter because I'm going to get a big kickback. And I think that is the way to really think about, like, on a super broad level. That's the way to think about these games. It's not Ticket to Ride at all.
Sure.
But the idea that we are building infrastructure on a map, and then we're like investing in each other and in our own infrastructure and getting kickbacks. That's the gist.
Like ultimately, like it's a portfolio game in the sense that like I have a bunch. I need to buy a bunch of stock in people, and if I happen to have the most, like you just in stock, I have to run it too.
Yeah, I have to build the track for. I get to do the Ticket to Ride part.
Exactly.
Right?
But I don't need to win. I don't need to have a train in order to win this. I don't need to do the Ticket Ride part as long as my portfolio is in enough right people. Yeah. That
there are some wrinkles that one of the of how games like this exist, which is that in the beginning of the game, there's small trains available, and then once all those trains, if you want to buy trains, you have to buy small trains before you buy bigger trains, and then bigger and bigger and bigger. And as you buy bigger and bigger trains, like the first train of a bigger value, so like the small trains are 2s, then you go to the 3s, meaning they can go to 3 different cities. Every time you buy the first train of a new genre of trains, something in the game changes. It represents the march of time. So like some element changes, and one of the most famous elements that changes is that like sometimes when you buy a train, your old trains just
die.
They die. It's called rusting. They just disappear. They literally go away. And the wrinkle of this game and games of its genre is that if your company does not have a train, your company then is required at that moment or at the appropriate moment to buy a train. And if your company cannot afford the train because it does not have enough money in its treasury, then you as the president must help fund that new train. And as we mentioned before, money is points. So that is like the stressful element of these games. And that's like, I think those are the main things that people should know about how this game operates.
Like, I've always loved your ability to describe like, Trey's doing well. Let me invest in Trey's. Like that is like the perfect, like, I go like, oh yeah, I can see why people like this game. But like when you talk about the rusting, this is where when people hear it, they don't understand. But when they see it, they go like, I'm out.
Yeah, the rusting in this game, these games are, I always describe each one.
There's some brutality.
There's some brutality. These games, right? Like I always feel like it's a roller coaster. Yep. And like for the first large chunk of the game, you're just going up that first hill. You're like
running up the hill, Kate Bush, baby.
Yeah, and you're going up, and everything seems fine. I've got trains in my company. I'm building out an infrastructure. My train is going from this city to that city. It's getting nice capital. I'm just going to invest. And then once that first train goes away, pandemonium. Like you said, you're like, how do I get enough money to buy a new train? I don't want to have to come out of my own pocket. How do I move things around?
Like no matter if you've never played, there's no amount of verbiage we can give you to prepare you for it.
Yes.
Like, you will just have to experience it. And when you feel like, you want to flip the table, it is know that like there have been many people before you who have had the same experience.
Yes.
And you will just have to trust that
trust the process.
If you can get past this, you will be able to mitigate this. And then the juice is so sweet.
Yes. So what makes Railways of the Lost Atlas?
This is something you're assuring me it happens at some point.
Some people out
For
there.
some people.
So that being said, that's kind of like the background of what this game is about, and then let's start to talk about like the unique features of this game and the things that jumped out to us, what we liked, what we didn't like, et cetera, et cetera. I think for me, actually, before we even dive into the gameplay, you already started to hit on something, Paul, which is the clean graphic design.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, do you remember Glory to Rome? How it had the cartoonish?
Yes,
and then like you had the Stark,
the fascist
edition.
Yeah,
and like I couldn't play the fascist edition. Like it's the same stupid game. Like but whatever it is, like you play the fascist, like this is so joyless.
Yeah,
and I don't know exactly what it is, but like I equate the graphics of Atlas to the fascist version, but it's inviting.
But that's appropriate.
But
it's fascist fun.
Fascist forward, fascist fun forward.
Capitalist hellscape fun.
But there is correct minimalism, and then there is minimalism that really feels stark.
Yeah,
and I really like.
This reads more as clean than it does.
Exactly, that's exactly what it is. Like
soulless.
And so I was like, oh well, like I can like what it does really well is it's clear.
It's so clear.
Here's where you put this in, and without being like drab, whatever they did. I don't know graphic design well enough.
Yeah,
I just know that like I look at it, I understand its iconography. Emotionally, I don't feel like I'm oppressed, and
no, it's. I agree. It's very, very clean. They've done some things that are sort of classic for the 18xx genre, and they switched them up, like a company charter. When you start a company, you get a little charter. They changed the way those look. They're like these vertical cards where like money sort of floats to the left, trains to the right, and that's a whole new look.
Design.
Yeah.
And we'll talk about it later that like companies can merge. And when they merge, you take the two charters, they sit side by side, and then you put this other card across them that fits perfectly, and it creates this whole new charter. It's like it's actually clever and smart design.
I would say like to the yes and I think if I were to reduce it to one word, the graphic design is welcoming.
Yes. Which is, I think, the key here is that you don't want it to seem dusty. If you're trying to bring in new players, you want it to be sort of inviting, but also like not convoluted. And one thing that I really love with the design is that as you put tiles down on the board, as you build your rails out, they have kind of like flavor art on them, like little subtle roads, and it sort of shows a society kind of building out, like, oh, here's a road, here's a local road. And they even have things listed on there, like there's a post office, and they all have like the cities all have names that they give them. Unfortunately, they made the city text tiny, and they made it like an italicized script almost. So it's honestly, for me, it's actually impossible for me to read. Like I have to take my phone.
I had no idea that they have names of those little circles.
Yeah, and I have to take my phone and zoom in, which is really sad because they took time to do that, and
it's unimportant.
No,
it's
flavor.
But it is flavor, but it is actually, I think it's important. The reason why is because it's about creating this world. And when I played with Candace and our friend Tim, and we zoomed in and we found the names, and we were referring to places by their names. It just like it creates more storytelling at the table. It just makes it more. It captures the imagination more, which I think is important for a game to do. So I'm hoping if this game gets a second edition, they will just increase the font size and not have it be like a script, because it's a waste. It's such a waste to me. It's so sad. I also don't love the font in the rule book. It's like this typewriter font, which drives me nuts. But small quibbles. I think that overall it looks great. I think this is a great way to bring new players into a game like this. So I'm like, I really applaud them on how this thing looks. But that being said, now that we got looks out of the way, let's talk about the first big thing with this game. The thing that I think it's most notable for is that you build your own map first before you start playing on it. And most 18xx games, I mean, every 18xx game, although there is one coming out that is modular as well, but in all of them,
there are dozens of games in which the map is already made.
It's just there. Not only is it pre-made, but like a lot of consideration goes into like this city goes here. There's a lot of history that goes into it. Like, hey, like this represents what this place looked like at a certain time. And there's mountains here and there's rivers here. And there's like a lot of thought that goes into making sure this map is a very, very balanced map. But in this game, we're just going to make it up. Yeah. We're going to make up the map. How did you feel about the map making process, Trey?
I think different people are going to react to it in different ways. I could see as a veteran player, this was a delight to you and the process was deeply enjoyable. I enjoyed it the first time we did it. The second time we did it, I was bored.
You were bored. Well, now what was it about the first time versus the second time?
Just kind of like the initial exploration can be fun of like, hey, we're building a map and should it go here? And like, I didn't know enough about the game for these to be other than kind of like, well, that kind of makes sense.
Right.
You're building a map and you're creating a terrain. Especially because like you're building this map and it's not like you have any you're not making the map better for your position. You have no position.
Right.
So a lot of what you're doing initially is just kind of like creating this mutual thing that we're then going to engage with later. So that's interesting. It was more interesting to me the first time. I would say like as a new player, I think you would, and to a lesser extent, Jordan, when we were building it the second time, you're seeing the possibilities and how it's going to impact gameplay.
Right. I think that was the difference.
And I was not. And so for me, it was like 45 minutes before we could start playing the game.
Yeah. First time we built the map, we were just kind of, what happens is you get these tiles that are like, it's almost like 3 hexes combined together. And they'll usually have like open terrain or maybe a place where a city can go or maybe some water or some other features, mountains. And the first time, I think we were just kind of like, oh, let's put these things together. This looks like a fun geography. And so we just rebuilt it. The second time, and also when I built it with Candace, and also with when you, Paul, you, me, and Dimitri played it, there was more thought in terms of like, hey, there's a bunch of mountains here. This might be good for tunneling. If we put tunneling here, we were thinking about like, oh, how do we think about how this map relates to these companies that we're putting on the board?
And you're kind of deciding that as a table.
Right. And so I can imagine...
At no point... it is the mechanism, like whoever flips the tile gets to place it. So, Ben, you don't get to say, Trey, that's a really bad spot for that. Like, you could say that, but I would still... But it's going there, Ben.
Right.
Right. Like, that would be the way it actually plays out.
Yeah, and so I can imagine why it may have been like less exciting for you if you're just like, I'm not really seeing the ramifications of these things.
I'm not invested.
Let's just put these all out so we can start playing so I can learn the ramifications.
Right.
I can see like the fun in both ways. I had fun.
It was a
both
delight
ways.
to you. I was
having the best time of my life.
Yeah.
I was, because, well, there is something fun about like, hey, let's just make a random board and then see, oh my goodness, this randomness, look what it created. Or there's the idea of like, ooh, like imagine if you had this company, but then that company was over there and had to contend with this. You start to like choose your own adventure a little bit. It's like SimCity almost. Like, oh, I'm gonna like create a world and this will have a choke point that they all have to go through. And so honestly, both ways are like, they so speak to like my pleasure center, like what I love. I love building a map. I love seeing how it's going to develop, where it's going to go. What did you think, Paul?
I think the map is great. Do we set out the corporations, the miners first, or
map first?
Like, I think that is the only part that, like, only playing twice. I don't know, like that I would flip first. Because like before the tiles come out, that way you have some idea of like what is of value. Because like right now, as I understand it, like you make the map and then the layout. The
way the miners get laid out, only 3 are available at the beginning of the game.
Two, right?
Well, depending on the...
So Trey and I did the long game.
Oh, okay.
where you actually have 3 columns.
Okay, awesome.
But what it means is that some of these miners are not going to be accessible at all early in the game.
Exactly.
And Paul's saying that if you actually saw what that order is, it might actually influence how you design the map quite a bit.
Right. Yeah.
Exactly. And that's just only 2 games, so I don't know. But like right now, like if you don't do that, like someone in the turn order is going to have an advantage depending on how. It might not be the first person, by the way. It might be the first person.
That might be why it is also.
Yeah. So if that's the case, then like randomly someone is going to be in a better position, and maybe that's good, maybe that's bad. But to me, it seems like it would be more deliberate if I could know where they would be.
There should be a term. We should come up with a term of a thing that happens, I think, in a lot of board games that have variable setups. Like this is a form of variable setup. It's incredibly variable setup. That's like one of the big pluses of this is an incredibly variable setup. But there's the time where you have the variable setup. And then I will think about this is the time where you put your elbows on the edge of the table and you study the map. Like this is a moment of reflection because the map or whatever the variable setup of the game is going to have a huge impact on what your strategy in this particular game is going to be. You can't just necessarily jump right in. And I think that's what happens sometimes. Like we get, and this part 2 is like we now have the map. I mean, see the miners come out. This should be a moment of, ooh, how am I valuing certain positions?
Right.
Because we're then going to go and auction some of this stuff. So that's like, it's part of the balancing mechanism is like, if there's a really strong position, it should go for a lot of money. Right. Like that's part of how these games work. And so it's kind of rich in that. But as a new player, I'm looking at this and I don't know how to comprehend what I'm looking at all. But that's also like, that's true of every 18xx game is that it's a brutal economic game that can be very punishing, and it's posing these really fascinating questions to you that you're honestly like not prepared to answer without multiple plays of the game, and you've got to get over that hump. Like that hump's really important, and that's when you start to appreciate it. But there is this hump, of where it's going to ask you like, "Hey, we're bidding on this thing." It's like, I don't know, is it good? Should I bid a lot? Should I bid a little? I don't know. You know, like it asks those type of questions of you all the time.
Well, and by the way, the gag is that I don't think that there's ever a good answer for any of those questions. Like the hump, there is a hump, but like. And it's a lovely lady hump. But the truth is that...
Trey got that.
No, but the thing is that like the answer is actually very much in flux, which is something I love about this. But that being said, just going back to this idea of like knowing what the miner flop is before you build the map, I would totally try that out.
Sure.
And I think this game would invite that kind of exploration. The game, there is a note at the back of the book that says like a variant that you can play with is that you just... build the map exactly how you want it. Like you don't think like, oh, this flipped and that flipped. Come up with a map and just make something that's nice. Make it look historical. Make it remind you of something.
And that's very much the vibe of the design.
The vibe is like
the whole way through is kind of like, you don't like this, change it. You know?
The vibe. I mean, it is. The vibe is kind of like we want you to have the best possible time with this experience. So if it suits you more to have the miners first, I wonder though that like. I think that there's like some value in not knowing what any of these miners when they're coming out, because that way
you're slowed down that process at all, it would probably be bad.
I think it would slow it down if you know which miners are first available. I think that like not knowing which ones are going to come out first, how important something is going to be, means that you're going to kind of build the land in a more sincere way, if that makes sense. Like you're just seeing like, oh, this terrain would be good for this company, or maybe we should have this company away from all those cities because it has an advantage because it's near this area here, whatever. You're focusing on that. Whereas if you start to say things like, oh, this company's gonna be out first, so let's like hobble it, you know, because maybe we overcompensate in a way that's like not.
What would happen? Like, you know, what would happen is if I were, so let's say I'm fourth in the bid, like, you know, or wherever I think the best bid order is, like, you know, and this company is going to come out first. Like, well, I think I need to put this as far away as possible because, like, I'm not going to get this. I'm not going to get this company. Someone will like bid the right amount before it gets to me.
By the way, we played something wrong, which is that we're not supposed to know our turn order until after we build the map.
Oh, yeah. that's hilarious. I love it.
No, that's how it would have to be, right? Is you can't be invested in the map at all in the building of it. Other than
that makes sense. That makes
you
sense.
used to do this with Gaia Project, where you would take the tiles and you would align them in a way that you thought just to make them as balanced to your eye.
Yeah.
And like some people have no interest in that, but you were just like, let's have a good game here.
Yeah.
Let me make sure that the map is not skewed towards a particular faction.
But I didn't know we played that wrong. That seems like a great.
We also played another rule wrong, which is that
Paul should win.
Paul should win. The moment that a 2 train is exported, all the 2 trains go away. So when we played our micro game, and this is very in the weeds, but for people who know, they'll be like, oh, okay. But there was a game we played, Paul, where we kind of got stalled around because no one bought that last 2 or whatever. And so actually it was not supposed to be there.
It would have been exported.
Yeah.
Okay,
So
no, right. It's all, like, I love it. I think, every choice that they made is a plus to me as far as like there isn't that is I
think the map building, what I like about the map building is it sort of going back to a phrase I just used, it captures my imagination. I love the idea of creating this land, and there are different regions, and as you play the game, the different areas are going to have a different vibe, and it'll actually look different to you in your eyes. When I played with Candace and Tim, we had one area where there were like a bunch of cities, and they were like bounded in by like the sort of like canyon of mountains. And then there was another far-flung capital city. And I was imagining this land of like all these cities, like in between like the mountain pass, you have to go through it to reach this big open area. And I think it's really neat. And in the game that we played, Trey, with Jordan, how we had this land that had this extreme choke point right in the middle, and then you took over the choke point, and we had to abandon the game, but there was going to come a point where we were going to have to deal with you, Trey. If someone wanted to get from the south to the north of the board, it was all going to have to go through Trey, and that was going to be a really interesting. It was going to
be a question of whether the game would end prior to that, but we had run 3 distinct and separate lines, and they had not really come together, converged or conflicted. And I didn't know whether that seemed like a bad thing.
It was about to all come together, right? Like I was in the south.
I'm not sure Jordan and I were. Yeah,
Jordan was, but he was close to it.
He was building in such a way to make it hard for me to interact with him.
Yeah, but like that was going to be to his detriment at some point. Like, because he was just spending he was not able to. Anyway, this is getting so far in the weeds.
Yeah.
The point is that like there was like a Jordan area, there was an area for me, you were right in the middle, and it felt like different areas, and that just captures my imagination so much. And I think what I think is so cool about it is that it really injects like whimsy into this game, right? Like 18xx games do not have whimsy. There's nothing whimsical about them.
There's a chill about it.
And it's like it sort of starts the game off in a place of like fun, right? Like fun forward. Not to say 18xx games are not fun, because obviously I love them, but
they're not necessarily fun forward.
But for people who don't play them, like the first step is this really creative, interesting group thing that you do that gets you invested in the land that you're about to create. And I think that's actually a really important thing. Exploit, yes. There's actually a paragraph in the rules that say that everyone who works on the train tracks in Lost Atlas earns a living wage.
Well, there we go. That's good. It's important.
I'm not sure that's better.
So in case you're wondering about the labor,
the reality of the history of building railroads.
This is Atlas.
No, but this is
better country.
Just so you know that in this fake place, labor is treated well. Labor is treated well, guys. Don't worry about it, guys. Okay, so now the other thing is we're talking about the variability. The game has there's 3 ways that you can play the game. Modes, because there's modes, there's variants. You can do a short game, a long game, or a micro game. And so I've played all 3 types of games. Paul, you and I played the micro game with Dimitri. What did you think about that?
Well, I won, so I really enjoyed that.
You did win.
I think
because you and Dimitri collaborate. Well, I was playing a long game, and you and Dimitri collaborated.
You play in the long game style.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have anything negative to say about this game. I think everything shines at every level. Like the micro game. Like if you want a taste of 18xx, like here it is. There was no rusting though, right?
I think there was. I think there was maybe a light rusting.
Okay, so if you want that flavor, I think the micro game is for like we finished. It was like maybe
2 hours. Yeah, 2 hours and change.
And I think we got so Dimitri enjoyed the game and he would play again. Like I feel like for whatever reason 18xx really clicks with him.
Yeah, we played Chesapeake with him like almost 2 years ago, and he had a great time.
And it's where like I go like, oh, your learning curve is steeper than not steeper. Like it's a better learning curve than mine. It took me a lot longer to get some things that Dimitri like has. Like
he was in the zone.
Yeah,
and he was like right out of the gate. Dimitri was making really savvy moves with his track length. He actually fully screwed up my game. Like he was stopping me in a way that like he should have. And he was really into it. I wonder, do you think that like the micro game is like a good, I guess you sort of answered this, but like for someone like Trey who has bounced off the genre, do you think it would have been smarter to start Trey off with the micro game?
I think that the micro game has a little bit more rails to it. Like so, it prevents you from when we first played the first game, you got 2 corporations and you felt like that was.
Are you not you're just not going to acknowledge the pun you made?
Well,
it has more rails.
Of the world, which is also not good.
Go on.
That was an example of the game asked some interesting questions of you and with some kind of brutal consequences.
Yes,
and I thought like, having 2 companies would be better than one, but in fact, like both were undercapitalized, and that's a tough lesson,
right? And
like learning, and you felt bad because you had not kind of caught what was going on and warned me.
I'm experienced enough that so basically the first time we played, the first time the 3 of us played, we played also with a 4th person. We played actually kind of we sort of set up the short game, but also did like I set up for the micro game. And Trey started up 2 companies in the first round right off the gate, which was you can totally do, but it's a little bit more of an advanced move because you have to really be aware of how much money is in there, like how many trains will be available. So it's a whole bunch of things you have to think
Whereas
about.
The micro game, you just start off with less money, so that was not an issue. Like I
just want to explain the micro game. By the way, is like. There's fewer trains, there's fewer companies, it's a smaller map, and it goes 4 rounds. We should also say this game is a set 4 or 6 rounds no matter what. So it's not like when the bank busts. You can play with a variant that the bank does bust, like a traditional 18xx is set rounds. Micro game, you're just going to play, you're being the yellows and the greens. You're not going to get to the higher levels of upgrades and trains and everything, but you still get to buy stock and run trains and
I didn't realize this until I bought my first company and I go like, oh wait, I can't buy another company because I normally start with 2. I try to start with 2. That's how I play the game, and I go like, oh, this is very good to do this because if Dimitri had started with 2 companies, I don't know if he would have had as good of a time. Mm-hmm. So as far as your question is like, is the micro game a good intro? I think absolutely.
Yeah,
it safeguards you from doing some of the things.
Well, I think the micro game also doesn't. You're not forced to deal with the scope of questions, Trey. That you're like, I'm facing all these decisions I have to make. The micro game is just like you don't have to worry about them too much. You can just sort of focus on the nuts and bolts of the game and have fun with that, and you'll get a taste of those larger decisions. And that way, you'll start to get some context for what those decisions would be. And then when you go and play a longer game, you're a little bit more equipped to do that.
I think I'm as somebody who's kind of bounced off the genre, this didn't change that for me. I feel like I'm getting closer, but so like I'm hesitant to like offer advice when I'm bounced off of it. So like what the hell do I know? I do think like there's an interesting discussion of like if you're trying to educate someone and get them into these games, like what the right path is. You know, if you're starting with somebody who's played Ticket to Ride, like I think there's definitely some intermediate steps to go there. Like I really like Chicago Express / Wausau Cannonball. Like that's your introduction to kind of shares and, you are not these companies, you own them. It's about making money.
Yeah.
Like that's a simpler version of the thing. I think if I were designing this game and I were actually intending it for it to be a gateway game for 18xx, I think I would have included a starter scenario with like, Here's what the map is. Here's what your minor layout is that you play your first time with new players. Because if you remember, like Catan actually does this. Like it's part
the balance
I
map.
think actually the game may have a starter map.
It may. Okay.
It may, but I'm not sure. They definitely have some pre-printed maps and an
If
insert.
you play Settlers of Catan or Catan now, like your most difficult decision is your initial placement on the board. And so they say, hey, for your first time, we're just going to take that out of your hands. Here's a balanced setup and go.
Yeah.
I think that's what I would recommend is like maybe it's even a smaller map. The things will go in this order. Here's the setup, go. And because I think a lot of maybe I'm wrong, but I think a lot of the joys that you're experiencing in the game come from an understanding and appreciation of the larger form.
Yeah.
And so like although it was kind of fun to put the map together, to me putting the map together should have been a 5-minute enterprise, not a 45-minute enterprise.
I mean, I think there's also something to be said about like, does this style of game just on some level intrigue you? Because I mean, the very first time I played an 18xx game, it was 18 Chesapeake. Jennifer taught me on 18xx.games. She taught me an Elder. And it was a long process, but like very quickly I was like, oh yeah, this is so for me. I loved the idea of building a route, making money, because to me it was the evolution of my love of Railways of the World. And so I sort of assume that people who love Railways of the World or Age of Steam,
which I do love,
which you do love, this is the next step. And I mean, I don't know the origins of Age of Steam, but I would not be shocked if the origins are from 18xx, right? Like there was inspiration drawn from 18xx.
Sure.
So I would think like the idea of building links, creating revenue like stock payouts. I would think that all that stuff would appeal to someone who really likes Age of Steam. Or I guess maybe there's something. Do you ever think that is part of it that like, oh, they're too close? Is it the uncanny valley? Maybe.
For me, like Age of Steam took me a year to enjoy because Age of Steam does something very similar to 18xx, where 18xx usually starts with the bidding on the miners or some version of that where I go, I have no idea. And like 18xx starts like bidding on like, oh, like how much do you want for this card? The turn order basically. And unless you have a few reps in, you really don't know how to value these things.
Yeah.
And I think that in itself is going to be hard. So like with enough context, you can see the beauty of the bids and what you're looking for. And I think like for all of it, like if you start off like I'm an Age of Steam person. Before I really had a hard time because Tom would bid this much. And I go like, I don't know. Like maybe it should be, maybe I should go last. Like Trey. Trey always goes last. Pass.
Trey's a cheapskate.
And Tom pays tens to lot for going first, but then he gets loco and he gets his blah blah blah. Like it's a lot harder to do that with 18xx because 18xx actually has a lot more interactions. Because like with Turner, you only have 7 things really in the map, whereas 18xx you have all these potential miners when the routes come out, and there are a lot of things, and so it requires more of a context.
Yeah, and well, I mean, it's funny because to me, I think that Age of Steam has a bigger hump than 18xx. Really? Yes.
Really? So crazy.
Well, I think that because with 18xx,
I disagree.
I think Age of Steam to me, it's like when I play with you guys, you all know, don't bid like this, don't do that, don't start with this, don't start here. That track can only upgrade to this. This can only go to that, whatever. Like you guys just know all the subtleties in a way that Trey's looking at me like, what are you talking about?
Well, I don't. This track can only upgrade.
Well, I don't know
what you're talking
not upgrade,
about.
but it's more like, I guess
that's actually an 18xx thing. It's when this yellow city goes to an orange to a green, I know it's going to get 2 more hubs and it's going to exit out of 4 instead of 2.
I forget. There's something. Either way, it's like you understand tile sets in a way, and I understand. With 18xx, there's also tile sets, but meaning that there's subtleties that you guys know and understand. That I was like, oh god, like last time I played with you guys a few months ago, I was like, ooh, it was hard for me because I just was, you guys just understand. And I play Railways of the World. I love Railways of the World. But just like
it turns out it's a pretty different game. It looks similar, but it isn't.
Yeah, there's it's much more. It's the understanding the value of the bids in Railways in Age of Steam is so very intense. And I think that because it's also you're so limited in what you can do on your turn that if you mess one thing up, you're like,
you can be out round.
You're out.
Oh yeah.
Whereas with H&XX, I find like, okay, you can mess something up and you probably could be out theoretically, but there's like a lot of stuff you can do. And there's a lot of manipulations and a lot of like interactions. Nevertheless, getting back to this game, let's talk about some of the other things. I'm sorry. I want to say micro game. I really enjoy the micro game as like a good, like if you just want to have like a taste and you don't have time,
snack.
It's good. Yeah. It does not have the scope that I like that I got out of the short game, and we didn't finish the long game, but the long game was doing what it needed to do for me. I really enjoyed that. In terms of something that I really like about the game, I love that all the minor companies, each one has its own unique power. I think that's a really fun thing.
But simple.
Simple,
very clear. Streamlined. It's like it does this one thing differently, and so situationally that can be super important.
Right, because like with one of the fun things I think of asymmetric powers in games is like you get that giddy feeling like, ooh, I can do this special thing, right? Like, don't you get excited when you're like, oh, I'm the one that gets to. This thing is normally like off limits for people, but I get to do it, And this game is like every single company does that, and like it's not the first 18xx game to introduce special powers for companies, and a lot of times private companies in other 18xx games, which are not in this game, sort of take that role. But this one, it really leans into it in a way that I think is just like really fun. Like your company may be able to, your train may be able to go farther, or my company may be able to have more trains, or you can build on water. It's really, really, that's like a fun element.
Especially because of the way the game it's set up. You have your minor corps. Then when you merge them, suddenly you've put together this superpower with this superpower.
Yes. And
perhaps those two things in this particular map go especially well together, and you have your perfect Reese's peanut butter, railway there. And the names even
the names come
support
together.
That where
that's all the major companies, they don't have any special powers.
I had like the eccentric northern port conglomerate or something, or experiment.
Experiment. You had you had the
expansive.
No. You had the what was the name of the one?
It's some smart design. You have these adjectives that go well together, so that it's actually very descriptive of what you have at the when you put
adaptive. You had the adaptive northern port experiment.
Yes. And it was doing okay despite my
ineptitude.
It was doing right. Well, you were smartly investing in it so that a lot of the profits I were making were going into your pocket. So, which is another one of those games. Like, this is one of the really great things about the genre of 18xx is that separation from, like, most games you play, like, you are this company, and it's like, no, you're the investor.
That's right.
And in fact, in a lot of 18xx, dumping your corporation hard because you are not them. It is all about your money is the thing that matters. That's a whole kind of game.
Shift.
It's a paradigm shift in how you play certain games, and that's important.
And what's good about the merger element, again, this is not the first game to introduce mergers, but it has a very simple merger. You basically, if you connect to another minor company, you can merge with it at the appropriate time. And, you don't have to merge you can merge with another player. In fact, Paul and Dimitri merged powers at one point. And there's even a variant where you can have like a hostile takeover where it's not so much about like, do you want to merge? Do you want to merge? Okay. It's like, oh, I own 60% of this company. You own 30%. I'm going to take over your company and I'm now the new president, which could be
the other guy owns shares in it.
But yes. Like with our micro game, for example, with Dimitri, like this is again to show the portfolio thing. He, like we had 50% of, each stock. I go, hey, do you want to do this? If you do this, I will be president because of turn order or whatever. And he goes, sure. And then he comes to realize that, because of turn order, I will actually be able to take the president's share from you, Paul. And
that must have given him great pleasure.
And then
to his detriment, by the way.
And then he goes like, Paul, are you okay with this? I go like, well, no, but like this is your best move, or it could be viewed as your best move. And truth be told, you're not going to do anything to hurt your stock.
Yeah.
Like
Your interests align.
So why would I care if you are choosing to do this or I'm choosing to do this?
Well, but in these games, a lot of times when you're controlling, you can operate the company poorly. Like you can make decisions to sell your trains to your other company, and you know, so control does matter.
But in the micro game,
there wasn't enough time.
So this is where, like, you know, so I was like, oh well, you know, this is fine, and like what wound up happening is like he ran the thing for like I think a round or operate round 2. I didn't have.
Paul was just a strict investor.
Anything. Yeah, you're just an
and
investor.
then it just ended.
And then I just started, like, then Ben sold.
I had to sell. I was so mad.
Then I got controlling interest.
Okay.
Actually, no, I don't.
No, you didn't get controlling interest. You just took my share, and you guys were just getting a lot of money, and if we had played a proper game, I was about to come roaring back, but the game ended because it was a micro game. But what was good was that, like, in that micro game, Dimitri got to experience the shenanigans of like, oh, I was ousted as president, but I was able to come back as president. We changed things around, and there was stuff happening. So it was a good sort of exhibition.
And ultimately, the only reason why I won that game was because I had one stock of Ben's that Dimitri did not, and Ben paid out, and so like he was ahead by $5, but like there were 4 more operating rounds, and Ben's paid out. So like,
and in retrospect, what Dimitri should have done was that once he was out of power, and he should have he probably should have sold some of those shares to hurt Paul, because Dimitri had no power, and they were just going to keep rising the same. But
these games ask these kind of big economic questions, and I think that's what's really fascinating about them. It's like these are not straightforward questions.
Exactly,
they're very complex and rich, and that's why like these are gamers' games for people that have invested the time to understand them, but then they really pay.
Right. Well, hopefully what happens is you play like a micro game, and then Dimitri sees something like, oh, actually, in retrospect, I probably should have sold that. Let's play it again, and this time I'm going to use that information to go into the next one.
You're building your skills for the entire genre of 18xx games here,
yeah.
Right? Like all of these have their quirks and different little rules, but like there's some core DNA there that helps you understand. Like learning this game well would put you in good stead to start playing other titles.
Yeah.
And so I do think, you know, I'm not part of the priesthood here, but I do think that this is a really important entry into the library. Like I think everyone who plays 18xx should absolutely play this, and it will provide a different set of pleasures for them to explore.
And I think that like one of the concerns, it was like, okay, like considering all the thought and attention that goes into building an 18xx map, would a game that just comes in and is like, oh, okay, we'll just build a map, and it could be totally unbalanced, could that still play well? Is this still a true rich 18xx experience? And I feel, sorry, I just hit my mic. I feel like, yes, I felt like, you know, you're still considering this new map. You're trying to figure it out. You're trying to exploit it to the best of your ability. And I think it's like it works extremely well. Like I was a little concerned, like, is this just going to be a wonky game where it has that nice 18xx elements in it, but like ultimately it's a fun experiment. But I think it actually works superbly well because it's really fun to figure out how your map is going to evolve, and it evolves very dynamically, as do all the maps, but this one especially. And I think that by starting the game with this map building, and you inject this tone of like fun, like, hey, we just created this world, and then this is not just about, hey, let's play an economic game. This is a game about, we've created this world, let's see how this world develops. Like where are the hubs in this world? Where are the economic hubs? What are the areas that are just kind of like the shitty towns? Like, how does this world look at when this game is done? And I think that's actually a really exciting element that gets injected into the genre. Word. And I would say that in terms of like, I think this would be good for newbies. I think the micro game would be really good. And I think that people who are,
what do you mean by newbie?
People who've never played 18xx games.
Right.
I think the micro game would be good for that.
Yeah, I get that, but I still think I would recommend some intermediate steps. Yeah, you're not ready to play this game if you've never played some other train game that kind of.
I don't know. I mean, I've had experience with people who have never played train games who've jumped right into 18xx, and it's been good. I think that it's all about
not wanting to win.
Well, I think it's all about just. I think it's.
Right, well, but you have gotten that way sometimes. Like your first games of this should just be beer and pretzels.
Yeah.
Don't invest too hard.
This is Ben's whole thing about 18xx. You're gonna lose, and it's gonna be brutal.
Yeah.
And just go with it. That's
yeah. And
right?
I just may be too much of a tightwad to ever enjoy that.
Well, I
right?
think that the game raises these questions, like you say, like you mentioned before. It's like it makes certain asks of you to consider all these things, and you have to be, I think, just okay with saying, like, you know what, we're gonna find out as we go along. I'm not gonna try to like plan for that, and I think that falls on the shoulders of whoever's teaching it. Mm-hmm. I think whoever's teaching this game has to adjust expectations of people who are playing. And, there was some, last time I feel like we talked about this, or maybe I wrote about it online. There's a lot of spirited discussion on our Discord about like, what's the best way to teach an 18xx game. And there were a lot of people that were like, no, throw people in the deep end, because this way they'll know right away whether this is for them or whether it's not for them. Like, what's the point of like coddling people or holding their hand if they're never going to like it? They need to know all the sharp edges. They need to know exactly what the pitfalls are. They have to know the brutality that could be there, and then they'll know if they'll want to play. And I just respectfully disagree. I don't think that's actually the way. I think you need to like get people need to have buy-in.
Well, so I'll make a connection that is kind of weird, but so Jake and I do Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and we go to a place that is very I would say family oriented as opposed to competition oriented. Mm-hmm. And
it's Applebee's. They just do jiu-jitsu at Applebee's.
That's right. And I remember, and like we talk about it, Jake and I, like the first time we entered, and like week 2, they were teaching a move, and Jake was choked out. Basically, someone's wrist was on his neck, which is the move, and pulled a little too hard. It hurt him, and for the next 2 weeks, he could not stop bitching about like how that hurt him. And this is the family area, like, and now 2 years later, he will never not do jiu-jitsu. This is forever a lifestyle thing for him now. Mm-hmm. And if we went to a more competition based place, he would never have gotten there. And I think like there are very different ways to teach 18xx. I believe that like the slow, gentle Ben way of teaching it will get more people. Mm-hmm. I believe that is like, I'm like, much like jiu-jitsu, 18xx, there's a brutality about it, and you can massage it or whatever, but you're gonna get hurt. And in jiu-jitsu, you're gonna get hurt. You're gonna get
trains
choked.
Are gonna rust.
And like I said before, you think you're okay with it. You're not okay with it.
You have to find the humor in it. Like if you don't find the humor in it, you will have a hard time.
It will not. But like you can get there and go like, oh, I can recover, or you can get there and go, I will never play again. I mean, like it depends on how your experience is, and I think like when I hear the way that you introduce new people to 18xx, like it's going to be a wine day. We're going to have wine, cheese.
That's what I do.
And rust.
I actually did not do it with you, Trey. Partially because the first time we played this was at Tom's, and we were starting at like. Started teaching at 10 o'clock because Avalon went on for like 2 hours, which was ridiculous. And then they were playing Modern Art and banging a gavel so loudly. I mean, could you imagine teaching an 18xx game while people are like screaming, playing Modern Art and like 3 feet from you? And so we didn't start playing until 11-ish. And I was like, you know what? I just was like,
yeah, right.
I don't want to do the whole, like, I don't want this to do the whole tutorial. But normally when I do teach new people, I do say, listen, guys, I always say, don't worry about winning. This is just teaching. This is like a video game tutorial. I try to do it like a video game tutorial, and it really does. Like, I think there are a lot of people that have similar reactions to you, Trey, where they are like, but what about what if I do this? Then what happens? Because then this
right. You try to ask for advice, and even then, it's kind of like, well, should I be bidding 200 for this or 120? And the answer is, it depends.
Yeah,
like,
and
no, tell me.
I know that I can see that's so infuriating because I can never give you a straight answer, and that's why, like, a lot of times when I teach the game, I say, don't worry about it. Just like go for the ride.
Yeah.
And I did not do that with you, to be fair. But
It
also
probably wouldn't have worked anyway. The don't worry about it don't work on.
But
on
that
me.
being said,
I'm gonna worry about it.
Ultimately, it's like,
It's my issue.
but also like you're not always going to have people that are going to do that. Like ultimately, it comes down for what the game is. Yeah. And so I do think though that this is a really good one to learn on.
Like
And by the way, I was to say the mergers. What's good about the mergers is it sort of gives you a goal. If you don't really know what you're doing, at the very least, you can say, "Let me connect my two companies. I can just work towards that."
Yeah.
Especially because there's going to be benefits of that you were not going to appreciate. But if you just accept that building towards a merger is something that's going to help you, then that keeps it simple.
That being said, when I played with Candace and Tim, I merged my two companies. Candace merged her two companies. We had two big corporations, and Tim sat there with his one sad little company,
And won the game.
and he just invested and won the game. So,
So
So it depends is the answer again.
I like
Yes.
you had told me that Candace says because of this game she could get rid of all her 18.
Yeah.
And
It's pretty shocking.
she said, and I don't mean to misquote her, but so I hope I get it right. She basically was like, I could see myself getting this game and selling all my other 18xx games, except for maybe like one or two special ones.
And for me, like, once again, only second play, only two plays, but like I think I get it. We used to play the Resistance, and then Avalon came out, and then we never play Resistance anymore.
Yeah.
Never. There's just no version where we ever play. And
We're not going to play coup.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I
will play coup, but go on.
I feel like this game like does that for me. Like I never need to play another 18xx. I would always prefer to play Atlas because to me, for as the hobbyist, remember I'm not the Ben and I'm not the Trey. This hits all the things I like about 18xx just faster and more gently in a way that like he's like, oh, this is just easier to get into all this stuff, and it has that. The map building is fun for me, and so in the same way that like Age of Innovation, all the real difference is like, oh, well, now you bid on these various powers. It's like, and that mix and match is like, oh my god, it's the most amazing game. It's Terra Mystica where you just shuffle in a little bit of difference. That's all it is, but like that much opens up so much variety and so much imagination and just the simplicity of like, oh, well, we're going to build this map together, like opens so much stuff. And the way that the miners come out, it's just so, to me, it's so intelligent. It's a very intelligent design. And I go like, oh, I can see it getting to the things that I like so much quicker, and it requires so much less time than like, let's say my 17-hour 18x China.
Yeah.
It just like once again, only two games, but like I think I understand where this game fits, and I would agree with Candace completely.
I mean, the fact that I've played this game, I think it's 4 or 5 times over the past 2 weeks, which, by the way, for an 18xx game to have that number of plays under the belt in that short amount of time is crazy, but the game allows for it. I love it. I think it's great. I think it does what it sets out to achieve. I'm still holding on to my 18xx games because I love them, and also
lifestyle game for you.
They're lifestyle, but also like they do offer really fascinating variations that I think are really cool. But God, the map building on this is like chef's kiss for me. I absolutely love it. I think it really injects so much fun into it, and I think this is what I also like about this game is that it treads that line between being like unfocused with its modules, like, oh, you can play it this way or this way or this way. And we talk a lot about like which way is it supposed to be played. Like, remember evacuation? It's like, oh, race mode or points mode. It's like, well, just tell me.
us.
But this one, I actually feel like it does say like this is the core rules.
It's so modular at its core that being more modular in how you play it feels more organic than somebody who's like, well, you can do this and this. And it's like, you're the designer. Just tell us how you want to play the damn game.
Yeah. This
right?
one, I feel like there is a way to like this is the way to play
designer,
it.
Right.
But like, what's nice is there are certain things to make the game a little softer and gentler. Like if you sell a bunch of stock, a value is only going to drop down 1. But you can say, no, it's not going to do that. You can play with more traditional 18xx rules. You can do the map in a certain sort of way. You can have hostile takeovers. There's a way to add in capital, like a headquarters, which is really a fun module that I played with Candace and Tim. There's like all sorts of ways to plug in stuff And I think they just want you to have the most fun as possible with it. And what I also love is thinking about where this could go. There's already a thread on BGG about like expansions, like what would be some other minor companies that'd be really fun. And that thread is cool to look at. I've participated in it. It's fun to think of other tiles that may come out with an expansion, other elements they may bring from other 18xx games that they may add into this. Like there's a lot of ways it could go. They could change the market. Like the stock market could go from being like a linear stock market to more of a grid. They could really play around with this system so much. And I think the upside is so great. And I think whether you're a newbie or not, for me as an experienced 18xx player, I just think it's fun. And I think it's great. And I think it's a great innovation on the genre. And I think it could be a hit. And in fact, I'm already hopeful on my personal Instagram account, at Ben Mandelker, if anyone wants to follow. I put up a photo from this weekend of our game, Trey.
Yeah.
And a lady already messaged me and goes, I just bought this. It looks so pretty. I just bought it. And I thought,
yeah,
I did it.
That's actually,
I'm influencing.
Honestly, I was like,
you are an influencer.
That's pretty cool. And I'm so interested. I don't know what her experience with board games is, but I'm interested if she comes to it without really any knowledge of 18xx. Even maybe she doesn't even know what the genre is, but just is like, oh, here's a game about trains. Like, will it seem daunting to her or not? Like sometimes part of me feels like approaching these games knowing what 18xx is, I think it does mentally make you feel like, oh God, guys, here we go, 18xx. And if you have no idea even what that exists, like, does this game is this much more approachable?
And is this something you learned from jiu-jitsu? Does a punch hurt more if you know it's coming?
I think,
I mean, you're still going to get hit in the face. It's just like, is it worse if you see the punch?
I think I think in jiu-jitsu you don't punch, but like the metaphor tracks. Like, is it worse to? I think you're always like angry, shocked when it comes from out of the blue, especially when you feel like, oh, you didn't tell me. The moment you get that moment, you didn't tell me this was coming. You know, and it doesn't matter if they told you or not, because it's just the feeling that you felt like, I didn't have the context. Like, we told you that it was going to rust. We said, like, listen to like this your timestamp. Paul said that you wanted to. There's nothing that prepares you.
Yeah.
Because you don't have the context.
But I think like, so I try to imagine, and I feel like as people who are like really into heavy games, we have this podcast, you talk about 18xx. So much about the talk about 18xx is, oh my God, it's long, it's mathy, and but the brutality is so hard. By the way, these games are honestly, the time frame is pretty good with these games. Yeah. Even with the long game, we're on track to finish probably about 4 or 5 hours, which is good. But I think if you are just like, okay, we're going to build some tracks, and like, oh yeah, we got to make sure we don't lose your trains. And then the rust happens and you're like, oh my God, this is so hard. I almost worry. I actually think there may be some value in just like falling off the deep end in that context. Because if you know that there's this awful thing that's coming and you're like, oh shit, I have to be ready for it. And you go into your very first turn, you're thinking like there's this terrible, terrible thing that's going to happen. Then I think you do care about all those decisions. Like, but what if I build this here? Like, what's the ramification of that? Because you just know, like the hurricane is coming. I gotta like get all my canned goods. I gotta put tape on the windows, you know. And if you just are like,
sure.
If you're just like, oh, it's a little breezy out there, let me just go about my day. Then you could just enjoy the fun of having your windows blown in.
It's like what you're describing is like, do you want to see yourself slowly get fed into the wood chipper, or just drop into wood chipper?
Well, it goes totally against what I was just saying. Like, I think that like for teaching, I think you want it to be soft and gentle. But if you're just you're just going in blind, I think it's better just to go in blind and just do the things that seem fun, because then you're not going to be paralyzed with, but there's going to be this terrible thing that happens to me.
But then there's this abrupt, but then you get to that point where you go like, are you the type of person who goes like, oh, that's interesting. I couldn't see that.
Right.
Or you
need the assurance that at some point the wood chipper is going to become pleasurable.
That's right. Like exactly. like ultimately, like
I think of it more of a foot massager.
Like I believe that the core problem with the when people bounce off is like, does it feel unfair? And like with the rusting at the 4 trains, like it feels unfair because if you're vulnerable to that, what's happened is like you've done pretty well. You've gotten your 2 trains. They're making money. You're doing fine, and you go like, and all of a sudden, whoosh! Oh God!
Literally happened to me on Friday, by the way.
Whereas, like a lot of people, when they first play, when they have context of playing, go like, oh, I'm not going to do as well as I could do because the 4 is coming and I need to give space so that I can buy a 3 train and blah, 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 blah. Like you're not racing as much. Mm-hmm. And
these games do have a different narrative arc than like you typically, the line goes up and to the right in a lot of these games. And that is not true of these games.
What do you mean with the line goes up into the, I mean, like the arc is like.
I'm just like if you're drawing, time versus your like progress in the game. Typically, as time goes on, your progress, goes smoothly up and to the right. I like this is a kind of a cliche of corporate presentations here, and the graph goes up and to the right. Like everything's going great, and like that's just not how these games work. It's like I'm going up and to the right, and now there's a severe dip.
Exactly.
These games have the arc of Jurassic Park. Like it's literally like you show up, it's like
people get eaten.
That's right.
No, it's just beautiful and like. You're Laura Dern getting up out of the Jeep and looking at this beautiful. Look at this. I'm building tracks. I'm running trains. I'm making revenue. This is so fun.
Capitalism
I'm investing
is
in you.
fun.
This is great. And then all of a sudden,
the T-Rex.
Newman shuts off the power, and then the T-Rex of Rusting comes out. And then all of a sudden, it's like you're running from Velociraptors and T-Rexes for like the big chunk in the middle. You know?
Yeah.
Because Jurassic Park goes a long time before things go awry. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you get the scary part.
Some characters get eaten.
And then once it happens, spoiler. And then eventually you get through Jurassic Park and the thing is literally like it, right? First you have the T-Rex, which is like the 4 train, right? That's like that kills your choose. You're like, oh God, nothing could be worse than this. And then the Velociraptors are your like 6s and 7s, and like you're like, oh my God, I finally got a 4 train. I saved myself from the 2, and it's like, no, here come the Velociraptors.
And the 4 trains, they will rust.
And then the 4 trains are gone. And you're like, oh wait, but I thought the 4 train was like that was
my forever train.
That was my forever train.
But as brutal as that is, like Jurassic Park, there are so many sequels, and like 18XX.
Yes.
Like,
and the moment you get through that train rust, when you finally have permanent trains in all your companies, it is like that moment where they're just like looking at the Pelican flying over the water at the end. Just like, oh, we got off this island.
You didn't defeat the T-Rex. You just survived.
That's right.
Yes.
But to pivot, you said something that I really liked. Like you talk about math and then all of a sudden you rust. But like, I think what Atlas does that I think is really interesting is like in classic 18XX, you're doing a bunch of math and then you deal with the brutality of the rust. Whereas in this, you actually don't have to deal with that much math. You just have to deal with the brutality of the rust, which sounds like cold comfort, but like
there's a bit of that.
There's a little,
especially as you're like I have these break points in order to be able to purchase the next more expensive train that you definitely need to make. And like when you're $5 short from being able to buy that, 4 train,
or like you have to think about like how much money am I going to put in? Am I going to make this bid for this company so that way there's enough money in it so that we can get an initial train?
Yes, absolutely. But like, I would say in 18XX that math is much more involved because you have to deal with the miners, you have to deal with your stock price dropping because people sell and all. And then you have to deal with the grid of like, oh, am I going to?
This is more streamlined.
Exactly, and so like you get to the brutality, and then you can really make your choice. Like, oh, I can deal with this punch in the face. I can deal with the T-Rex, or I can't. I think in a way, I think it really like I did not come on the podcast to thinking I'd be such an advocate for this game.
I love it.
But that's where you've ended up.
But I think like, I think 18XX, I think Age of Steam, I think all these games that have like the brutality about it also become games that will become lifestyle games because in the end, like you want a little
wood chipper.
You want a little danger. It's fun to have a little danger.
And like, we play Avalon all the time. And the reason why we play Avalon is because there's a little blood in it. There's a little stake. Like, if I get duped by Tom, that's not pleasurable. So I'm going to prevent that. But now my buy into the game is so much stronger. Like, you 18xx, Age of Steam, all these places where
Twilight Imperium.
Yeah, Twilight Imperium. I'm never gonna let James win again. You know, I will kamikaze.
We will create an alliance next time.
Right. But in this way, like you're always. I should say it best. If it's only an intellectual exercise, the game can only last so long. I think you have to put, like skin in it for the game to really survive. The games that really last for us are the ones that you go like, oh, this is stories, memories, all this stuff. Like, I know you guys love Concordia, but like, I have no memories of Concordia. Like, it's not a big game for me. I have no go like, oh, this is not one moment where I go like, that was such a great. Remember that Concordia moment. Mm-hmm. But
I have to say, this also makes me. This is strange to say.
Fish.
Fish. I love fish. This makes me actually appreciate arcs more.
Okay.
Because in arcs, I see Jordan and Matt and Drew and others have the same enthusiasm for that I have for this. Mm-hmm. And I also see in arcs me being more in Trey's shoes a little bit. Now, I haven't played it as much.
Your nose is pressed up against the glass a little bit.
Well, where it's like I've only played one in-person game. I'm down to I want to keep exploring it, but like I honestly, from that one game, I don't get the hype. Like, I don't get the hype. And like, I sit there and I say, I see what you're all enjoying about it. No, I wasn't playing the campaign or anything like that, but I don't.
You can see them on that big wave over there, though.
Right. And I see, and I'm like, they like their eyes, like people loving this game. They love for X, Y, and Z, But for me, I'm like, I see what you enjoy, but I don't understand why this is some people are saying it's the finest game of all time. And so I am like, I don't get it. But then being on this side where I'm like, this game, Railways of the Lost Atlas, rocks. This is an amazing game. And seeing how, Trey, you appreciate it, but it's just, you're not like diving, like you're not really, doesn't seem like you're compelled.
This changed everything for me, right? Yeah.
I'm like, okay, I get it. And I can also sort of empathize a little bit more with like Matt and Jordan. Mm-hmm. And it actually makes me want to, I was going to push forward with arcs anyway, because I do want to crack that code and I want in on the party, but it makes me realize like, oh, like I appreciate their love of that game a lot more, if that makes sense.
And maybe like people will like do that for Age of Innovation.
I'm in.
Yeah, I know. Like you when you, the moment on the text chain when you go like, I got it, or like, finally.
I do think I would be a little hesitant to play it in person, just because like I would feel the clock.
Oh, sure.
And like it's really nice not to feel the clock. It'd be more like more at stake.
Yeah.
In an in-person game, you're much more likely to blunder. It's like, oh, I really did this wrong. But anyway, I'm enjoying our plays of Age of Innovation quite a bit right now.
Well, the good news is that we're all playing games that we're really enjoying right now. So I think that's about it, because otherwise I'm going to keep talking for another hour. So you have been listening to Game Brain, produced and edited by Matthew Robinson, Tom Donnelly, Trey Alsop, and Ben Mandelker. Special thanks to Daedalus for our incredible music. More on Daedalus at GameBrainPod.com. And thanks to Adam Marpellic for our incredible graphics. Be sure to check out his Instagram at Crewbaloney.com or at Crewbaloney, or his website, which I just said, Crewbaloney.com. You can reach us by email at contact@GameBrainPod.com. Thanks for listening, and go play some games with friends, or make some friends with games. Oh, I guess the music ended already. Sad.